several public hearings. For this meeting, the planning board is convening by video conference via Zoom app as posted on the town's web meeting calendar and the board's agenda, identifying how the public may join. Additionally, the meeting may also be broadcast by HCAM through one or many of its channels or platforms. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that some attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that others may be able to see you, and take care to not share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. All supporting materials that have been provided to the members of this body are available on the town's website via the web meeting calendar, unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless I note otherwise. So in just a moment, we will turn to the first item on the agenda. And we also need to open the public hearings. But before we do so, permit me to cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. I will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, the chair will invite board members to provide any comments, questions, or motions. Please hold until your name is called. Further, please remember to mute your phone or computer when you are not speaking, and please remember to speak clearly in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. For any response, please wait until the chair yields the floor to you and state your name before speaking. If members wish to engage in dialogue with other members, please do so through the chair, taking care to identify yourself. Not every agenda item will feature public comment. 4 items with public comment. After members have spoken, the chair will afford public comment as follows. The chair will first ask members of the public who wish to speak to identify their names and addresses only. Once the chair has a list of all public commentators, I will call on each by name and afford 3 minutes for comment. Finally, each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by a roll call vote. And just so everybody knows that if you're calling in from Zoom, there is a raise hand feature that will prompt John or myself that you have a comment or question to make. And if you're calling in by phone, I don't remember what the prompt is, John. Is it *9?
*9.
Correct. Okay, so if you're calling in by phone and you want to raise your hand, then you can enter *9 and that will put you into the queue. So really quickly, just on the agenda tonight, we have a couple of administrative items. And then currently we have 2 public hearings. One of those, the applicant has requested to continue, but before we begin, I'll entertain a motion to open the public hearings for the solar special permit and stormwater management permit at 71 Franklin Road, as well as to continue the public hearing, as well as the public hearing for a special permit for common driveway at 47/49 Stony Brook Road. And
So
I'll
moved.
ask, just for simplicity, I'll ask Muriel to make the movement and for Amy to second, if they're in agreement.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Okay, so we'll move forward with the roll call vote. Gary Trendle, yes. Mary Larson Marlowe.
Mary Larson Marlowe, yes.
Muriel Kramer.
Muriel Kramer, yes.
Dave Paul.
Dave Paul, yes.
Jane Moran.
Jane Moran, yes.
Deb Feinberg. Deb's muted.
Deborah Feinberg, yes.
Amy Ritterbusch.
Amy Ritterbusch, yes.
And Frank Durso.
Frank Durso, yes.
Okay.
Chair, may I just say really quick, there's a lag when I unmute somebody, so
yep.
Just be aware, everyone, if it takes a little bit longer, I am trying to unmute you.
Okay. Do noted. So before we get to the administrative items, the applicant for the special permit for the common driveway at 4749 Stony Brook has requested continuation to June 1st. And John, do we also need to, so we can shift the hearing to there, do we also need to just push back the decision date?
I believe the decision date is 90 days from the close of the hearing.
Okay.
Steph, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm pretty sure that's what it is.
90
So
days
then-
after close.
Thank you, Stephanie. So then on that, I will entertain a motion to continue said hearing to June 1st.
So moved. Muriel?
Amy Ritterbush, second.
Any discussion? Okay, so we'll move to the roll call vote. Gary Trendle, yes. Mary Larson Marlowe,
Mary Larson Marlowe, yes.
Muriel Kramer,
Muriel Kramer, yes.
Dave Paul,
Dave Paul, yes.
Jane Moran,
Jane Moran, yes.
Deb Feinberg,
Deb Feinberg, yes.
Amy Ritterbush,
Amy Ritterbush, yes.
and Frank Durso.
Frank Durso, yes.
Okay, so let's go ahead and move to the administrative items. We have a couple of them on the agenda tonight. The first is a vote safe announcement from Connor Deegan. So Connor has a few words that, and I'll at this point turn the floor over to Connor.
Thank you so much, and thank you all for having me tonight. I'll be brief. A few of you I know have already heard my pitch, but right now it's really just a case of, with the risk of contagious disease, especially due to the coronavirus pandemic that's currently still in effect, and we still have a lot of active cases, we're looking at methods to decrease potential risk to voters coming up to election day. So the primary way that the state has been working with towns to do this, especially for the local elections that are right in the middle of this, is to have mail-in voting be a primary method to prevent voters from having to go to the polls, interacting with each other and election workers. This will help prevent the spread potentially and decrease risk of exposure for voters while still ensuring that they have their right to cast their ballot just as they normally would. It's a really simple process in where you just have to fill out a really basic application, which is available on the town website, on the Secretary of State's website, and it's also now on a bunch of media outlets in the town as well, because we've spread it out in a press release also. So once you have that, you can scan it and email it to my office. You can also mail it or drop it off physically at one of the drop boxes in Town Hall. And then as soon as we have the ballots, we'll just go ahead and mail it to you. At that point, you can either mail it back to us, or you can drop it off in the locked box at the front of Town Hall in its sealed envelope. And it just gets counted like any absentee ballot would on election day, where it stays locked up until it goes to the polls, and then it's checked in, it's checked out, and goes through the machines.
Connor, a question for you.
Yeah.
Are there any dates or deadlines that folks need to be aware of with regards to this?
So the deadlines are very open because they were designed on the concept of people being able to vote absentee or early in person. So you can request an absentee or early ballot all the way up until noon the Friday before Election Day, which will be June 29th. However, because we're aiming on a lot of this being remote and we don't know where we're going to be come mid to late June, we do recommend people try to get their requests in by the first week of June so that we can try to, make sure that you get your ballots before we get too close to the deadline, because we don't want to rely too much on the postal service to get it to you quickly. So if we can make sure that everyone has their ballots in hand as soon as possible, then it makes it more likely that the postal service won't be overburdened late in the game and people won't be receiving their ballots after they have to have it back. They have to have your ballots voted and back to us by the close of polls on Election Day. That means that you could, if you wanted to, physically bring your ballot in its envelope and hand it off and not have to even come in, as long as it got in the hands of a designated election worker or myself or the assistant town clerk to make sure that it actually is handled properly and goes straight into the polls, then you're all set.
Okay, great. So what I just heard is
Quick-
request your ballot now. And then however it gets there, make sure it gets to a town official by the close of polls on election day.
Question
Yep,
to the
thank
chair.
you.
Sure, Frank.
For our viewing audience, when exactly is election day? And secondly, congratulations to Jane Moran.
Thank you, Frank.
Election day has been rescheduled by the select board for June 29th. That is the last Monday of June. It's pretty much as far out as we could have pushed it. So we just wanted to make sure we had ample time when we were rescheduling it, because otherwise it would have been today. So it's definitely a boost that we got to push it out farther, so we have a bit more time to see how the situation changes for better or worse. But June 29th, mark down your calendars for that. But even better, you don't even have to if you make sure to order your ballot now, because it'll say it right on the top of the ballot when we mail it to you, of course.
Thanks,
Thank you, Connor.
Muriel, you had a question?
Yeah, hi, thank you. Thanks, Connor, for being here tonight and getting the word out as well as you have been. Are you going to the select board tomorrow to make the announcement too? So
I
it's
am,
out.
and I'm hoping that they're going to be as well trying to help get the word out, because it's just going to be a really big point that a lot of the elected boards have a lot of people who are watching. So it's great to know that you're there as an additional mouthpiece to say that this is something we're offering. This is a chance to get your vote in safely. And so between you and the select board, we want to make sure that that's keeps being announced and keeps being
This-
told to people.
The school committee and the Board of Health would be great ones too, if you were able to
Yep.
do that.
I have I've put in request to all board chairs. We'll see how many, and if you were actually one of the first to respond, so that was great.
Oh, I'm here. I thought it was my idea. I did have one more question for you, Connor, if I could. I know
Yeah.
that you were looking for volunteers, more youthful volunteers for election workers. Is that still the case? Because many of our election workers are older residents.
So yeah, a lot of our election workers are in a higher risk demographic due to age. We currently have a hiring freeze with the town, so we can't pay anyone at the moment. But we're more than happy if someone wants to volunteer for a few hours to help process ballots. The only rules around it really are that you can't have a direct relationship with someone else who's on the ballot, just so that we don't have any conflict of interest. But even if you were concerned but wanted to try giving even like a half day of time just to help process these things, we'll be providing PPE for election workers because they're considered essential personnel by the governor's directives. And so we've been working with the emergency management group to make sure that we have all of that secured.
Connor, is there a minimum age requirement to be an election worker? Is it 18?
So you must be a registered voter in the Commonwealth, except for that they do allow for a capped amount of those that are 17. So that are just residents of the Commonwealth. So those, I think it allows for two, if I recall, two people who are under the age of 18 but over the age of 16.
Any
And
other
if anyone
questions?
is, I was just going to say, sorry for interrupting. If anyone is interested or knows someone who's interested, I can get them the paperwork. It's just 2 sheets that need to be filled out, and that's it. And they can all be submitted electronically too. If someone wants to know what it's like or what they could be doing, then they can even give me a call or shoot me an email and set up a time to chat about like what they might be interested in doing if they were volunteering at the polls.
Awesome. Connor, thank you so much for making the time to join us this evening.
Thank you so much for having me.
Certainly a challenging time across a lot of fronts. So appreciate your effort and your progressiveness in making sure that people have options to vote and stay safe. So thank you.
Thank you for having me. And again, I know I've seen a lot of your applications come in already, but I look forward to seeing the rest of them.
Awesome. Thanks, Connor.
Thanks, folks.
The next item on our administrative list is the Form K lot release. And actually, we received a request from the applicant late today to hold. If you want to go ahead and tell us what you're proposing and give us some details, that would be fantastic.
Sure. So this is a 175 Hayden Row Street. It's a 3-acre lot with the normal frontage where the house is on 170 on Hayden Row, and it reaches back to Wild Road where it has 150 foot of frontage, which is from a planning board point of view enough frontage for building. So we hired the surveyor to split the lot with about 1.3 acres staying with the house on Hayden Row and 1.7 acres for the lot on the back, so that we have the opportunity to proceed later to see if we want to do something with it, whether to build it on it or not. So it's to split it between a 1.3 acre lot on Hayden Row and a 1.7 acre lot on Wild Road.
Okay.
Through the chair, can everybody see the plan? I'm sharing it.
Yes.
Yes.
And so, John, any comments on this this A&R from the town perspective?
So it looks like they are taking the lot over here and combining it with this lot to give enough frontage for a second lot. Not a problem in our view, but it seems like it's okay to endorse unless there's any questions from the board. It meets the frontage and the lot area requirements of the A&Rs.
And
I have a
John,
question.
can you just confirm, or maybe Mr. Duffy can confirm that the new lot will, where it says parcel B, will parcel B become part of the Wild Road lot, or will that remain as part of the Hayden Row property?
So parcel B, so parcel B is the larger piece. If I'm referring to the same way you are, and the
Okay.
back piece, it looks like a hockey stick. Is I don't know how he describes it, but he's saying that so right now it is owned by, the Duffy estate. Both pieces, they're separate pieces because that small piece at 16,000 square feet in the back was originally part of the Wild Road development. It never got developed, and my father bought it. So it's a separate piece of property legally, deed-wise, but it's owned by the Duffy Trust. So what you said is correct. Our plan is with the lawyer to get the deeds coordinated correctly, so that it represents one piece, one legal piece in the deed. But yeah, the intention is those two added together, which is 16,000 square feet and 57,000 square feet, which brings a total of 73,000 square feet, would be the final lot that we would be interested in, seeing if it's developable. So they would be combined.
Okay. And sorry for the questions, but so just to clarify
sorry.
then, that this is currently 3 different parcels. It would remain 3 different parcels. It's just that a portion of parcel B is getting shifted over to the Wild Road parcel.
Yeah, that's an accurate way to say it. Yep.
Okay. I was just,
So-
I was
Yeah, that's
struggling
fine.
a little bit with the
Well,
diagonal line going, kind of dissecting right to the left of parcel B. I was trying to figure out what that line
Okay.
meant.
So the property line is the one
So,
that's
through the chair.
316 feet. Yeah, go ahead. Do you want to speak?
So Mike,
Go ahead,
correct me
John.
if I'm wrong. I
Yeah.
believe, can everyone see my cursor on the screen?
Yep.
Okay. So it appears
Yeah.
that this
Yes.
is the property line for this parcel, and this is the property line for parcel B. Parcel B is marked as an unbuildable parcel since it doesn't have frontage. However, this note says that parcel B will be combined with this to create one parcel.
That's correct.
So this does not currently have the required lot size. This does. This does not have frontage, but this does. They will be combined, though not combined through this A&R process.
Okay.
Correct.
Got it.
Got it.
All right. Questions
These-
for the board. I
these
think
lines
are
Frank
not
had a
walls.
question.
Yeah, those circular lines are, looks like a chain. Those are stone walls.
Ah, okay.
So
That's helpful.
It is confusing.
Thank you.
Yeah, they are stone walls. Those are property dividers in the old days.
All right, Mr. Durso, you have a question.
Yeah, yes, thank you. Hi, Mike.
Hey,
My
Chuck.
only
Hey,
question
Frank.
is, are you certain about the Well Road part of it because of the potential for wetland in the back might diminish some of the property that you might need for the front side? I'm just wondering about the balance between wetlands and drylands and buildable land.
Well, will have to go to conservation. We're tagging it now. It may not pass conservation, and therefore it would be, wetlands lot, which we would have to decide how to deal with it, whether we keep it, whether we gift it as open space. But you're right, it has to be truly tagged and thoroughly and go to conservation with setbacks and all that stuff. So at this point, we're just carving it out with giving us the opportunity to later
Mm-hmm.
tag it, go to conservation, show the plan, and if they say no, it's no, and it would be open space and unbuildable. If they say yes, then we can pursue, a building on it. So that's ahead of us.
Okay, but through the chair, my point is, wouldn't that step come before this step?
Well, I'm not anticipating that they'll say yes, so I just said I just want to split it and then take my chances, to use that term, later.
Okay.
So if they say no, Mike, it's not buildable, then I have an open space lot, which we can keep in the family, or we can gift it to the town or to the halt or whoever might be interested. So I am aware that that next step is a step that would have to be taken. But right now I'm just splitting it off to give me that opportunity. The house is for sale, just for the record. And so when someone buys it, they get the 1.3 acres and we keep the 1.7.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Good luck.
Oh, thank you.
Other questions or comments?
Through the chair, I just have an edification question. What is the maximum square foot or the minimum square foot of a lot? Maybe that's to Mike.
Well, oh yeah, it's 45,000 per, I talked to Elaine, it's 45,000 square feet is the minimum
then-
size for buildable. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
And then the other question I have is also edification is, so the two lots, so you've got parcel B and then you've got the planned frontage for the Duffys, but it's not connected yet. So,
That's correct.
so shouldn't it be connected before it becomes an entire lot? Shouldn't that be legally connected? Because it technically wouldn't have frontage at this time.
Well, it would have to be connected when it sells, if I ever sold it after getting buildability confirmed. But I mean, per my lawyer, I don't need to connect it in the registry for the purposes of separating it. I would have to for purposes of conveying it, but not for splitting it, is what he said to me.
Okay. Any other questions or comments?
So, Mr. Chair, if I may clarify that, parcel B is currently marked as an unbuildable lot. That's why it doesn't have to have the frontage. It's not technically
Oh, thank you,
it's
John.
really an unbuildable parcel, not an unbuildable lot.
Right.
That's how it gets around that. That's pretty common for the ANRs. We've seen those before.
Okay, so at this point, I will entertain a motion to approve the ANR for 175 Hayden Row.
So moved, Muriel.
Amy Ritter Bush, second.
Any further discussion? If not, then we'll do our roll call vote. So Gary Trendle, yes. Mary Larson Marlowe,
Mary Larson Marlowe, yes.
Muriel Kramer,
Muriel Kramer, yes.
Dave Paul,
Dave Paul, yes.
Jane Moran,
And Moran, yes.
Deb Feinberg,
Deb Feinberg, yes.
Amy Ritterbush,
Amy Ritter Bush, yes.
and Frank Durso.
Frank Durso, yes.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Duffy. Appreciate excellent explanations, and good luck.
Thanks very much. Very much.
So,
Bye now.
Mr. Chair, before Mike leaves,
Yes.
we're going to go through the same process that we did for the previous A&R. I will go to town hall, hopefully tomorrow, and set up the table that it was on the back entrance, not the side entrance by Bill's, the back entrance by the dumpsters.
Yep.
It'll be on a
Face it on.
table, the entryway. Yep. And you can get buzzed in by the police, and we'll have the pens there. And then we will let Mr. Duffy know when it's been endorsed by 5 members, and we'll return it back to him.
Great. Thank you for that.
All right, and John, the last item here is with regards to administrative fees for 90 Hayden Row, 14 Elm Street, and 104 Hayden Row. So do you want to just quickly summarize what we need to discuss here?
Sure. So those are the 3 school site plans that were approved last meeting. The administrative fees needed to be waived. They had requested that they waive the fees, though not necessarily officially, so it wasn't caught in the proceedings. But they do want the fees waived, and they've submitted the fees for the high school, which is then going to be used for the consultant review fees. So if we waive the administrative fees, we can pay the bills, and they don't have to submit a check, and we can give them a decision.
All right, any comments or discussion from the planning board members? And if not, then I will entertain a motion to waive the administrative fees associated with, where were those addresses?
90 Hayden Row. 14
Sorry.
Elm.
Yep,
There you
90 Hayden Row, 14 Elm Street, and 104 Hayden Row.
This is Muriel Kramer. I'll make that motion.
Amy Ritterbush, second.
And no discussion, or if any discussion, we'll move the roll call vote. Gary Trendle, yes. Mary Larson Marlowe,
Mary Larson Marlowe, yes.
Muriel Kramer,
Muriel Kramer, yes.
Dave Paul,
Dave Paul, yes.
Jane Moran,
Jane Moran, yes.
Deb Feinbrug,
Deb Feinberg, yes.
Amy Ritterbush,
Amy Ritterbush, yes.
and Frank Durso.
Frank Durso, yes.
Okay, thanks everyone. So at this point, we'll move to our lone public hearing tonight for 71 Franklin Road, solar special permit and stormwater management permit from Seaboard Solar. So if we want to unmute Pedro and Nick and Adam. And I will say, just I failed to mention this earlier, but just from a time check, the good news is we've got a lot of time to discuss this. I also would very much like to wrap up this meeting by 9:30 p.m. So, typically we go until 10 o'clock. However, we moved our start time forward, and if you guys have a life anything like mine, 13 hours of Zoom and Teams calls per day is a long one. So just keep that in mind as we move forward. And just also so that everyone knows, we will have plenty of opportunity for public comment. My actually 2 asks. One is just a reminder again to keep comments to 3 minutes or less, which should be more than enough time to articulate your points. And then secondly, we will be using the outline, which is available in the meeting packet, for our discussion. And I ask that comments be relevant specifically to the agenda item from the outline that we're currently talking about. So just to kind of helps if we can compartmentalize all the different things we're talking about. So at this point, I'm assuming I'll hand it over to Mr. Rodriguez. And I guess what would be a really useful place to start is any updates that you have or have made since our last public hearing.
Yeah, I have a few updates, but if possible, I would like to pass my the seat to Adam Costa that I wanted to introduce the meeting, and then I'll talk after that.
Okay, great. Mr. Costa, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Once again, we appreciate you conducting these meetings virtually. We know that it's not an ideal format. I represent a lot of boards and they've all struggled with transitioning from in-person meetings to the Zoom format, but we appreciate the ability to do that and to continue to move the process forward, notwithstanding the challenges of the health epidemic we're dealing with. So we were last before you on, I think it was April 23rd. We had a rather short presentation that night because we were at the end of the meeting and had a agenda. But at that time, we had provided the board with a bit of an update on where we stood, what we had done to the plan in the preceding 2.5 or 3 months, because we hadn't been before the board in that long. We haven't done much over the past 3 weeks with respect to the plan itself. I will yield the floor in a moment to Nick Fasandola and allow him to provide a bit of an explanation as to the things we have done. But what we had hoped to do tonight was to talk about the changes that we had proposed at the last session of the public hearing, about the few changes we made in the last 2 or 3 weeks, and then address the several issues that had been raised at the first session of the public hearing, the series of topics that the board had hoped to work through during the course of the public hearing. Questions that board members might have. I know that the board had said it had hoped to devote a substantial amount of time during tonight's meeting to discussion of the project, and it looks like with your short agenda, we'll be able to do that. So with that, I'm going to yield the floor, if I could, to Nick and allow Nick to provide some further detail on the few changes that have been made since we were last before you, address some of the questions that the board members did have at the last session of the public hearing, and then Pedro can add anything he has as well before we turn the floor back over to the board.
Okay, sounds good, Mr. Costa. So Nick, I guess we'll turn the mic over to you.
Sure. Is there any way I could share my screen to kind of go over, highlight some areas in the plans where things have changed? Most likely would be more convenient that way so everybody could see.
You should be able to share your screen.
Okay.
Yep. If you go down to the bottom, there's a green button that says share screen.
Okay. All right.
And we can see your screen.
So as a quick update, we haven't submitted any revised materials to the board regarding this project since our last meeting. As we did have a quick meeting at our last meeting, we didn't really get into many of the changes which we made. We still have about 5 outstanding comments left with Beta. Mostly minor stuff, some housekeeping things, nothing that seems it's going to be make a major impact to the project as it's currently designed. So there won't be any substantial changes with regards to a response to Beta's most recent comment letter, which was dated April 17th, 2020. So this plan shows a broad overview of the the proposed solar layout. The red line, as I'm kind of following through here, that shows our previous submission limit of clearing and limit of land disturbance. As you can see, we have now brought the project in substantially in this area through here to maintain access to this existing trail. We've also brought the project limits in substantially along the western boundary to maintain access to this existing trail, which comes up through here. We've modified the limit of disturbance through this area to provide a greater buffer zone to this existing residence through here. And we did the same in this area through here. We've modified our stormwater management system. We've increased the size of this basin and this basin here. And we've eliminated a small basin that was down in this area. And we've also eliminated a small basin down in this area. We have a 15-inch culvert, which is going to carry water from this central portion of the site to a swale, which is going to try to carry the stormwater to this basin, versus before it was going to a stormwater basin located in that area. Overall, the land disturbance roughly decreased by approximately 5 acres. And Seaboard Solar has lost 1 megawatt approximately of capacity on the system with these changes. So we're no longer a 5 megawatt system. We are actually in the area of a 4 megawatt system to maintain these existing trails and pull in our limit of disturbance to the abutting residential parcels. See, in this area, some minor modifications to the driveway. We actually have a vernal pool located in this wetland over here. So we made some modifications to the layout in this area. All of the existing pavement through this section right here that was discussed at our first meeting, it's about 110,000 square feet of pavement, which we'll be removing as part of the project. We changed our final ground cover to a pollinator seed mix.
Hey, Nick, hang on a second. Frank, would you mind muting your phone? Just a lot of background noise coming through.
Okay, hold on, sorry.
So we've, where was I? Oh yeah, we updated our ground cover, final ground cover within the array to a pollinator seed mix with additional information located on our planting and landscape plan, which we prepared. Let's see if I can get this here. Yes. So, where are we? No. Okay. So we'll be doing, we've added landscaping, mostly screening plantings along the northerly side of the array, facing towards the Fawn Ridge Road development. So we have mostly evergreen shrubs, trees, a double layer of plantings along this portion of the array off the edge of the gravel driveway. And we're also proposing plantings along this westerly boundary. It also provides screening to the existing trail network, which is going to be maintained, which is shown in this black dashed line. And we're also providing plantings along the existing gas easement where possible to screen the trail, which is going to be maintained, which runs down the center of the gas easement, which connects to this remaining portion of the trail network and provides access to that pond area. That essentially summarizes the major changes. Other changes were made in response to the initial beta engineering review, mostly stormwater management items, a few other technical things that I really won't get into at this time. But if with regards to overall layout, landscaping, screening, those are a majority of the changes which were made. As you can see on this plan, we've also provided an open space plan, and we're going to be providing roughly 45 acres of open space on lot 1, which is the lot associated with the solar project. Lot 2 will have approximately 5.5 acres of open space. That is the lot that was subdivided off and contains the existing office building. So this identifies all the area which is going to be outside of the fenced area of the array, which will be dedicated as open space, not to be further disturbed for this project.
Okay, thanks, Dickon.
That's a quick overview. So that's, I'll turn the floor over to Pedro. He can go over his recent correspondence and other items that he'd like to address.
Nick,
Just real,
Nick.
real quick before we go over to Pedro, Nick, I think you guys have addressed most of the issues that were brought up in the beta review, but there's still some that are outstanding. So I just throw that out there that I think at some point before we move before we take a vote on this, we're going to want to make sure that all of those issues are closed out in the beta report.
Understood. Yeah, we're looking to get a revised set of plans submitted after this meeting to address those remaining few comments.
Okay, thank you.
Nick, can you also address, Nick, the status of things with Conservation Commission? Because I think that sort of goes hand in hand with why it is that we're not before the planning board tonight with a more final set of drawings.
Yes, so we are on with conservation tomorrow night. We've been pushed back a few meetings as they've been dialing in their procedures for public meetings via Zoom. They've asked us to essentially push back our hearing about a month now. I think it's been a few delays. I'll let Pedro speak to that a little bit further, which we've consented to. So we have provided updated plans and comments to comment made by the Conservation Commission's review personnel that addressed their comments. We haven't heard anything back yet. We'll be presenting this new layout to them tomorrow night, and we're hoping to wrap things up with conservation within the next meeting or so.
And Nick, also, since our last meeting, you've had communications with the fire chief concerning energy storage and the revised layout as well?
I have reached out to the chief. I haven't heard back with him. I've sent him the updated plan and his additional staff who help him review those projects. I think I sent 2 emails out with the updated plan, the turning plan, and haven't heard anything back from the chief as of yet. I don't know if there's been any correspondence sent to the planning board. If there has been, we haven't seen anything, but we still have not heard any final comment from the chief.
Okay. So at this point, I think you wanted to turn it over to Mr. Rodriguez for some additional comments.
Sure. Pedro, are you there?
Yeah, we just need, John is unmuting him.
Okay.
Give him just a minute here.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
All right. So Pedro Rodriguez from Seaboard. I just wanted to touch on a few items just to give a full update to the town where we stand in several items. Just so the town knows, we have been speaking directly with the engineering and the real estate team from Eversource Gas regarding the gas pipe that crosses our property. We send them our latest plan. They have no problem with us crossing the gas pipe. They are going to make some minor reviews on the driveways, and they're going to send us those specific requirements shortly, but it's going to be minor. They say that they have no issues on this. As you guys probably know, we have been working directly with the 2 Native American tribes, the Narragansett tribe and the Wampanoag tribe. The Narragansett tribe already visited the property. We are working with them with an agreement in which they're going to locate, a survey, and also come up with a preservation plan for any ceremonial stones that might be located in our property. As soon as the agreement is signed, which we'll hope that happen this week, we're going to proceed with the locations, the formal survey, so we can locate that into our plans. The Wampanoag tribe has not been able to visit our property yet because of COVID. We hope that they're able to do so anytime soon, so we can start the process with them as well. But we're going to be doing the same process, enter an agreement with them, and then they're going to be locating and surveying and creating a preservation plan for any stones that might be located in our property. In the last meeting, I understand and I'm aware that the planning board asked us to include Jim Haskins into this process, but after speaking with both tribes, they asked us, the developer, to communicate directly with them on this process and then update the town in the process moving forward, especially because we don't have an agreement yet. Regarding the open space, we continue to coordinate the preservation of the trails and the open space with HALT. The landscaping that Nick showed in the plans, that's where it stands right now, but it's not final. We received some comments from HALT, and we're hoping to receive all the comments, final comments from them, so we can include them and change the landscaping accordingly. We also send the plans to the trail committee. I understand that they're not going to be meeting, they're not going to be holding any Zoom meetings, but the chairman specified that he's going to be providing any comments that the committee might have, so we can address them as well. I also wanted to clarify, if it wasn't clear in the last meeting, we are going to be, providing and paying for the landscaping of the project. We're going to guarantee the growth of all the trees, and then we're going to be working according to the maintenance with HALT after that year, because they're going to be the one maintaining, responsible for maintaining the trails in our property.
Sorry, Mr. Rodriguez, can you just state that again? So you're going to be working with HALT to maintain the trails, or funding it, or you're going to maintain the trails?
So as of right now, right, what we're working with HALT, and I will let them speak later if they have any comments, is that we're going to be donating the trails to HALT, and they're going to be maintaining the trails, including the landscaping located in that. Now we're going to be paying for that. We're going to install them. We're going to guarantee growth of all the trees located on the landscaping. And of course, if there any major maintenance required, we're willing to work with them. It's not like all the responsibility is going to fall on them.
Okay.
And then the other thing is, I know that on the public, we got some comments or concerns regarding our commitment on donating the landscaping, if there was any guarantee, if the town had the ability to enforce it. I formally would like to offer and ask the planning board that they take into consideration to include a condition in our special permit that the open space and the leftover land in our property and the parcel will be located to a third party for preservation purposes, including the trails. That way the town is able to enforce that. If for some reason there's someone else, sitting in my chair in the future, that commitment is already there. So it's like a guarantee that that is going to happen. And we're willing to do that before the project is interconnected. So that way it's kind of holding us back. We're not going to make any money on the project. We're not going to be putting power into the grid onto the land. The open space is donated. So there's the guarantee and the way that the town can enforce that to happen. And my last comment that I wanted to make, I just wanted to clarify the area and the open space that we're going to be donating is all the leftover land located in the leftover parcel where the project is located and the ashland parcel. The open space showing the plans for the building parcel, that is existing open space for that parcel. But what I want to talk about and discuss in this meeting, in this process, is the open space located in the project parcel only, because that's included in the approval process. After we're done with this, then we can move forward with donating any leftover land that we have in the building. Just that we don't have any secure idea what we're going to be doing with the building, so we can't commit to donate land at this moment. And that's it. I pass it on to the board if I have any comments.
Okay. So I think what I'd like to do is, rather than just open it up for general comments, since we are actually just getting into the detailed discussion, let's go ahead and move forward to that. And so it's a fairly comprehensive list of topics. And in case any of the viewing public doesn't have access to this, I'm just going to read through these really quickly. And again, I want to do everything we can to try and stay focused on the specific topic. So Those would be vehicle and pedestrian traffic flow, truck traffic flow, emergency vehicle access, parking, etc. Intended uses, stormwater management, site lighting, utilities, parking lot layout, dumpster location, snow storage, snow removal, noise, HVAC exhaust systems, crosswalk locations and sidewalks, building design and landscaping, signage, impact on schools, other municipal services, value of neighboring properties, and wildlife corridors. Town department and board town department and board committee comments not covered above. Trails, natural resources and/or structures, historic resources. I think a really big one for us: screening of trails, impact on open space, earth removal with regards to the WRPOD, zoning compliance with regards to the WRPOD, limit of disturbance, tree clearing limits, battery storage, maintenance of roads and arrays, pollinator planting, wetland impact, conservation restrictions on the open space. So a pretty comprehensive list. I will say that not all of these will necessarily apply to this this hearing, but this is a comprehensive list that we work off of to make sure that we have not missed anything that is worthy of this discussion. So we'll go ahead and move into this outline. And again, that first item of discussion is vehicular and pedestrian traffic flow, truck traffic flow, emergency vehicle access, trail access / parking, and access to both parcels after separately delineated. So I'll ask Seaboard if you have any specific comments. I know you already noted that you have not heard back from the fire chief yet on emergency vehicle access and turning, but do you have any other updates or specific details on that outline item?
I can speak to the overall site access. As discussed previously, I believe at the first public hearing, we're going to be utilizing the existing driveway, which is located. Let me share my screen here once again. So the existing building actually had two driveways located off of Franklin Street. We had a single driveway coming in from Franklin Street in this location, and there was a secondary driveway located here, which provided access to the test loop and this test track area. So when we subdivided the parcel, we made sure to include this driveway area to be part of our new lot. So all access to the site will be through this existing driveway. There's no need to install or pave a new area for a driveway for this site. We'll be using this existing 24-foot wide access. So all trucking, construction vehicles will be coming off of Franklin and coming up this driveway right through here, and then entering the site in this area through here. Currently, we're not proposing any parking for access to the trails. There currently isn't any parking, which provides access to these trails. And as of right now, there's no proposed parking access for these trails located within this existing area. As Pedro said, they're actively seeking a tenant for what we're calling Lot 1 for the use of this building. And I don't believe they want to encumber that property with parking for access to the trails. Then up through here, once you reach this point at the site, this is going to be gated off with a Knox box for fire and safety access only and for maintenance access only. So there's really no opportunity to park vehicles in this area and provide access. The closest spur to any trail would be up through here. It doesn't, and we don't want cars blocking our emergency access to the solar site. So as of right now, there is no proposed public parking access. As far as emergency vehicle access, we did meet with the chief a few months back, and he gave us the size of the truck. It's a SU-30 brush truck style vehicle, and we did prepare a turning radius plan that shows the truck can adequately circulate all the gravel access driveways that are proposed with no issue. So hopefully, once the chief has a chance to take a look at that and provide any comments, there shouldn't be any major concerns at that time. I think that pretty much addresses comment number 1, unless there's any specific questions you'd like us to address.
Yeah, so Amy, it looks like you have a question or a comment.
Yeah, most of these trails are existing. I'm wondering how people access them now if there's no parking. Can they be accessed from a different road or from a neighborhood?
I believe there's access off of, what's the street up here? This is
Falcon Ridge.
Or Cross Street.
Cross Street, yes. There is an inlet off of Cross Street, and I believe there's access through the open space parcel over by Fawn Ridge Road. I don't know if there's a dedicated parking area, but I believe there is a trailhead access off of the cul-de-sac bulb here. So, I mean, it'd essentially be street parking off of this road here or off of Fawn Ridge Road to access those trails if someone was to drive up and look for access to these trails.
Okay.
Right. Any other? Oh,
Yeah.
Yes, go ahead, Jane.
Okay, so right now I'm having a little bit of a problem with the trail system that you're proposing because I don't see any continuity or contiguity. I see that you're allowing existing trails to exist there, but as far as the site goes, how are people going to be able to access the trails that currently they can make a full loop or go through and enter? For instance, I know that there's a trail that enters in through Legacy Farms. I think it's cut off at your fence area here. And yeah, so how can we make that a little bit better? I'm wondering.
Well, with regards to the access of the trails, the goal of the project was never to create a trail system. The applicant is committed to providing the existing or maintaining the existing trails as they are today. I'll let Pedro speak a little bit more to this, or Adam. But
no, I'll speak. I'll speak to it, Nick. So I think the point that Nick is attempting to make is that the trail system as it exists on the property today is not a public trail system. The public has used it from time to time, is my understanding, but it's not a public trail system. It's a trail system that has existed on private property for some time. When committing to develop this project and when designing the development of this project, we had many conversations about that trail system and how best to preserve as much of the trail system as possible. I know one comment was made during the last session of the public hearing, although it was brief, about changing sort of the nature or the character of the trail system. And there can be no question that in developing a project of this sort, there are going to be portions of the trail system, especially those portions that directly abut sections of the solar array, that are going to be changed in character. But our goal here was, while we have the option of eliminating the trail system and building on the property, which is private property today, we never wanted to do that. And Pedro, through his conversations with HALT, since well before this project began and well before this design was even finalized and brought to the board, has committed to preserving as much of it as possible. So certainly Nick can speak better than I can to the continuity of the trails. I do think that we've preserved much of the continuity I don't know the exact percentage of the trail system that we're maintaining versus what will be affected by the project directly. Maybe Nick can speak to that, but there will certainly be quite a bit of continuity maintaining what exists on the site today. And Nick, can you give a percentage or can you identify specific
Actually,
areas of trail?
Mr. Costa, I apologize to cut you off, but I do want to make sure that we're not being redundant, and we do have a specific item for trails. So if it's okay, rather than jump to all the trails discussion now, let's go ahead and stick to the outline, and we'll just hold off on further discussion trails until we get there on the outline.
Through the chair,
Yes, Dave.
I think I might suggest that we're already pretty deep into the trails discussion. What I was going to suggest is let's discuss all 3 items for the trails right now, and as soon as we finish, we cross off the other ones. So 13 and
16.
16. Thank you.
Because right now we're on trail access and parking.
Yeah. So
Which is hard to discuss without the others.
So let's do this. Let's go ahead and continue the discussion on trails. On item 16, the screening for trails, because it's lumped in with screening, I'd rather save that as a separate discussion because I think that's a really big one. So
certainly, but
sorry, Mr. Costa, just again trying to make sure that we don't have to come back and repeat things we've already talked about. But if the group is comfortable having
appreciate
that trails discussion, then let's go ahead and do that now.
just through you, Mr. Chair, I think I was kind of agreeing with you that not to discuss it twice, but would you be okay if we finish the discussion for crossing off the other trails items?
I'm okay with that. Yes. So let's go ahead and I think if we're ready to move forward, actually, let's do this. Are there any other questions or comments related to item 1 in the outline? And I realize that unfortunately we can't close this out because we're still waiting on a confirmation with regards to the emergency access and turning paths. But if we have no other questions or comments there, then let's.
Mary, I do.
Yes, Deb.
I'd like to. I just want to put sort of a hand up in the air, just to say, I as a planning board member and someone thinking about the community, I'd like to see some trail access parking, if at all possible. I'd like to hopefully have the applicant, I'd like to ask them to sort of think about that a little bit, not intense parking, kind of like what we did in Center Trail with reclaimed asphalt or something like that. Maybe with HALT, they can come up with a plan that's not too intensive, but just nice enough that it pulls the cars off the street.
Okay. So, and I think that's related enough to trails. So I'll turn it back to Mr. Costa, who I think had a few more comments before I cut him off. And but if you want to go ahead and continue.
So thank you, Mr. Chairman. Certainly we're happy to discuss amongst ourselves. We know we're not closing things out tonight. We're not completed with our process before the Conservation Commission, and we have other discussions underway with town staff. So we're happy to have the conversation about potential parking. I will say that I think because of the nature of the use of the site and security issues, as were already alluded to by Nick, that does present some challenges, and specifically the means of access to the site being driveway and having to limit access beyond the sort of checkpoint into the site. We've got some issues in terms of where that parking would be located, but we'll try to think outside the box and to have those discussions amongst ourselves. Nick, if you're still on, can you speak to the continuity of the trails? Because that was a concern that one of the members had raised that sort of got us into this discussion.
Sure, Adam. Excuse me. So with regards to the existing trail network, let's see if I have it. Trying to get to okay, this one shows a little bit better. So the entire trail network is being preserved other than this section right through here. There's an existing trail which comes up from this private residential lot. It enters the property and then connects to the trail which runs down the center of the gas line easement. So as you can see, that's right in the middle of this portion of the solar array. So that portion of the trail is going to be eliminated. The other section of the trail, which is going to be eliminated, is, I'll zoom in a little bit here. You see that how this little dip through right here, that section of the trail was impacting our system layout in that area, but there was sufficient space and available land area to actually relocate this. It's about a 160-foot long section of trail. So we're just going to continue this portion of the trail and cut a new trail in and connect to this existing trail right through here. So access will still be maintained on this spur. Other than this section of the trail being removed, the entire existing trail network is remaining as is. So that's how the trails are going to exist and be modified as part of the construction. So we're modifying this one section, and this other section is being eliminated. Obviously, this section of the trail isn't going to be of much use, but we're not going to go in there and do any additional land disturbance activities to alter that trail or remove it. It's just going to essentially dead end at the fence line.
And so Nick, just to confirm, if when the open space would be transferred over to that third party for management, are all the trails within that open space parcel that would be managed by that third party? Or are there any other trails that are actually traversing the commercial solar parcel?
So if I can answer that question. So all the trails located in the property, if you look at the plan right now, a vast majority of the trails are currently in the solar parcel. There's only that little portion of a trail in that one over there that is currently in the building parcel. That one is going to be included in the open space, of course. But all the trail, all the leftover land will be allocated and donated to a third party for managing that system. We just want to make sure that when we have the open space open to the public, it's properly maintained, it's safe for everybody. So that's the road that we want to take.
Okay. Dave, yes, you have a question.
Yes, thank you for recognizing me, Mr. Chair. So I wanted to side with the applicant on the trail discussion. As they said, they're not required to save any of these trails, and I think they've done a great job on the trails. Just the fact that they kept the trail going right through the middle of their grid and are going to fence both sides of it. We have not seen that from any developer before for solar panels. To one of my other planning board members, the fact that the trails are not contiguous, I just don't see it. They're fully contiguous. They're keeping exactly what they have there. That's just my personal opinion. And the other comment about parking lot, I think that's being too demanding on the applicant. And I would like to suggest that we just have a straw vote to see who would support that, because I don't want to keep this trail discussion going on and on and on for meetings after meetings after meetings. So I think it would be good to kind of close it out. They've done a spectacular job, in my opinion.
Okay. Mary had her hand raised first, so we'll go to Mary.
Hi, thank you. This is Mary Larson Marlowe. I agree with Dave. I think that the applicant has shown that they're being very good neighbors and citizens of the town by making these trails continue to be available to the public. And they're, I don't fault other members for seeing what else we can get for the town and for the public, but nonetheless, they have no obligation to make any of this public. And I think it's great that that they are preserving as much as possible and preserving the nature that makes the trails, interesting too. So I think that that's wonderful, and I do believe that they've done above and beyond what I was expecting and hoping for. So.
Okay. Jane, I think you had a question or comment.
Sure. I see this trail of this double dotted black line going through the middle of the solar array. Is the proponent, yes, that one. Is there ability for the public to get through there? Or, I heard you talk about a solar Knox box and fencing and all that. Will the public be able to get through there, or is that not possible?
So the site is going to be fenced off in two areas. So the gas company doesn't want us to fence off their access to their easement. So we're going to have one closed loop of a fence coming through here. And then we're going to have a second closed loop fence along this portion of the, and there'll be access gates with, the ability for the fire department to access the northern, we'll call it the northern array and the southern array at both driveways. And the utility company will also have access to those gates too. But this whole area will be fenced in, and which is why Seaboard Solar is okay with having this trail open to the public, because we'll have our fencing on both sides of the array.
Okay, so the people will be able to pass through that on that green strip.
Correct. Okay. Yes.
Okay, great. I think that's great, because that answers my question, because that allows for continuity and contiguity. You can see where the folks can now travel around the outside. They can travel through this middle section and then travel up. They can make a big loop.
Yep.
So that answers my question about the continuity and the contiguity.
All right.
That wasn't made clear.
As long as, folks can go through that green stripe there.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. Are there any members of the public that would specifically like to comment about the trails? And again, if you'd like to make a comment, you can use the raise hand feature. You can click on the participant window and that'll pull up, and there's a little button that says raise hand. So, Mr. Gasser, I'm glad you're here. If we can unmute Maury Gasser.
Hi.
Hi, Maury.
Hi. First of all, I want to comment that if there was a parking lot, we wouldn't complain, but we don't have one now, and the trails are being used, so it's not an essential part of this. As far as I just want to comment on the trails. These are all the trails that we basically care about today, and if they're preserved like this, then we think it's a reasonable trail network. So that's it.
Okay.
Just a point of order through the chair. I think Mr. Gasser should have position on halt as a speaker.
Yes, you're correct. And name and address or representation for HALT. Thank you.
All right. Maury Gasser, 28 South Mill Street, president of HALT.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dave, and thank you, Maury. Mr. Robertson, and give us just a second to unmute you. You should be unmuted.
Hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yes, we can.
Great. 2 points on the trails. One concerning the parking. One of the issues that I brought up at one of the earlier meetings was that because of a number of these trails, the access to them is being denied because of the solar array, and that I was concerned about the access points, such as the Fawn Ridge Road access point. We having several cars parking along the street there on our sleepy cul-de-sac that would be that problem exacerbated by the fact that the other access points that people could usually do by foot or park someplace else are going to be concentrated into just a couple of access points. Which leads me to the second point on the trails that are listed here. I have explored these trails over the years quite a bit, and this is not the all the trails that exist. There's several offshoots that go through the solar panels and into other areas that may or may not be impacted by this development. So I think that, and I guess the last point is that as far as the seaboard being obligated to preserve these trails and they're just doing us a favor, I do sort of take exception to that. It's been over 20 years these trails have been open to the public, and we've had access to them. And I do think that they do have an obligation to support them, and it's not just doing us a favor.
Mr. Robinson,
Thank
one
you.
question for you. You mentioned that several of the other access points would be closed off, and I'm just curious. I see one, and that's the kind of in that southwest corner where it says section of trail to be limited. That one would clearly no longer access the network, but it seems to me like the rest of the access points would remain intact, and I'm wondering if there is something I'm not seeing here.
Well, that's to my second point, that these black dotted lines are not representative, at least of my understanding from my just wanderings, of all the different areas that one can access to. For instance, to the on the Ashland side of things, it's just this one path on the northern section that goes. Well, there's from my personal navigation, there are several paths that go that way, as well as on the going towards the Legacy Farm area. There are paths that go right through that northern section of the panel area to connect with the Legacy Farms area.
Okay, thank you. Jane has another question or comment?
Yeah, I just want to back up the previous speaker's comment that we used to use the Legacy Farms access trail to this property quite often, and those trails do exist. And it's in the vicinity of the Tennessee gas line pipeline already. So I'm not sure what can be done about that, if anything, but though, to the previous speaker's point, they are out there.
All right, Mr. Costa has raised his hand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I just wanted to respond briefly to that, if I may. I think that
Yes, please do.
I think that it's important to note, and this graphic on the screen share is appropriate. It's important to note that this solar array itself is entirely surrounded by what appears to be green on the screen. That's the open space. And as was discussed previously, the trail system that is being preserved shown is entirely within the darker green, and a very small portion of it within the lighter green sections, shaded areas of the plan. So to the extent that there are other access points, I can't profess to have firsthand knowledge of this trail system, and I hike trails in my neighborhood quite often, and there's the beaten trail, and then there are a variety of other trails that aren't quite as well defined that often exist off of the main trail. So it's quite possible that there are other less heavily trodden trails that are not what we're showing as mapped on this plan. But if there are other points of access on the Ashland side, on the right side of your screen, or on the Legacy Farm side, we'd not be eliminating any of those other points of access. So if there are other trails coming in off the far end closest to Ashland and eventually come and meet up with the main trail system, we'd not be eliminating those trails, because even though they may not be mapped on the plan that you see here, we're not doing anything on that corner of the property whatsoever. That is entirely several acres, over a dozen acres of open space there that we're not touching. Similarly, on the opposite end of the property, there's a significant buffer between the property boundary and where the fenced-in area of the solar arrays is located. So just to this point of not every trail is shown in the plan, or other points of access might exist, and the suggestion that maybe we're consolidating those points of access, and that might result in more parking on a cul-de-sac or more parking in areas that are currently used to access the trails. We're not consolidating points of access whatsoever. If there are existing less heavily trodden trails that are used to connect to the trail system you see here, those will continue to exist when this project is built.
Thank you. And just to be clear too, it's my understanding that, you know, if this is built out and the open space parcel is managed by a third party, then there's also an option to make other modifications within the open space to improve the trail network. Is that a fair assumption?
Yes.
Correct.
Okay. Amy.
I just wanted to clarify, there's a lot of different shades of green on the map. So am I correct that all of the green areas are either current or will be future dedicated open space that can't be built on later?
Sure, I'll go over the different color shades of green. So this, we'll call it a bright dark green, and there's a large area up through here. This is the open space provided on the solar array parcel located within Hopkinton.
And that will be deeded to a conservation organization of some kind after?
Correct. Right now, we're working with HALT.
Okay.
So this darker green, this is an existing open space parcel, which was done as part of the Fawn Ridge Road development. So there's about 12 acres of dedicated open space associated with the Fawn Ridge Road development. That's the access off of Fawn Ridge Road. So this is all dedicated open space. I can't say exactly who has ownership to that, who maintains it, but it is I believe it's a town parcel dedicated open space. This small triangular piece here, this is land owned by Seaboard Solar, but it's located in Ashland. They'll also be committing this 1.84 acres to the open space network. And then the brighter color green is existing open space associated with Lot 2. So this existing building, part of the zoning requirements for this district and this use require a certain percentage of dedicated open space, and we're making sure to maintain that dedicated open space, which is required for this use. So this is not included in the solar array project. This is essentially existing open space as outlined today. I hope that answers your question.
But just to clarify, it's not specifically designated as open space, and that is subject to change based on what eventually happens with that parcel. Is that correct?
Can I address that, Nick?
Sure.
So that is correct that it is not currently defined open space in terms of there being a meets and bounds description with regard to what is identified on this plan as the Lot 2 open space. I wouldn't go so far as to say that it's subject to what happens on that parcel, because the permit that issued with respect to the building on that parcel required a certain percentage open space as part of the zoning that was in effect that allowed that building to be constructed.
Okay.
Recognizing what that permit requires, we've maintained that percentage. In fact, exceeded that percentage with this 6.55 acres.
Okay. Thank you. That's helpful. All right, Mr. Robertson. Mr. Robertson has another question or comment.
Yes, sorry, just a quick clarification. I didn't want to be lost. As far as the parking concern on Fawn Ridge Road, with the COVID-19 situation, over the last several weeks, there's several cars parked there. Right now, with this being an unknown, sort of quote unquote unknown resource to the town, just known locally, and so I'm just concerned that will be more of an issue should it become more publicized, more open space, and there not be alternative parking available in other designated areas.
Okay, thanks. And just to offer one anecdotal comment, I personally live at one end of the Center Trail, which is a highly traveled trail particularly with COVID-19, and candidly, it's rare that I see a car parked near it. So again, different circumstances and a lot of other variables out there, but at least in the case of a highly used trail, there typically are very rarely cars parked there. Any other questions or comments from either the planning board or the public? Yes, Jane.
Okay, one last and I'll let it go, but I agree that it would be nice to have an alternative parking area, but other than Fawn Ridge Road, because that is a public road and people can park there right now. But I don't see a trail access from the building unless they scrape out and I don't even see a trail that goes from the most southerly piece of the solar array panel up to the trails, the existing trails, because they've cut that off. So I don't know what the answer is, but it could be a problem. And to your point, Gary, Center Trail, we do have that parking lot across the street from Hopkinton Lumber. So, there is public access, but the Fawn Ridge Road people. So it might be worth taking another look at it to see if we can scrape out some other public parking areas.
Okay. Yes, Miss Kramer.
Hi, it's Muriel. Yeah, to Jane's point, there is an access point there across from Hopkinton Lumber, and it's a neighborhood, it's a community neighbor who shares that space with us. It's the Respite Center's parking or overflow parking, which is exceptionally nice. And the Center Trail also can be accessed through the school property. So I wonder if a lot of people access the parking there. But I park across from Hopkinton Lumber all the time and have never had a problem accessing the trail. But even 2 small parking spaces is a big boost to us to be able to access the trail system if we're gonna maintain that open space. It's gonna be deeded or protected, and Halt's gonna use it. So there is certainly the expectation that people will take advantage of that, and that's our hope now that it's publicly permanently protected trail system. And I think that I won't overextend my talking or whatever, but a couple of parking spaces carved out is a huge boost to the public's ability to be able to safely access. I don't know where that crosses on Cross Street, but that is not a place to recommend people pull over to access a trail system.
Bad road.
So let's just, maybe I can summarize, and it sounds like in general, planning board and people are supportive of if there was an opportunity to tuck in a couple of parking spots somewhere in the parcel, and maybe it's in that Ashland corner, which not in our jurisdiction, but sounds like there wouldn't be a lot of objections to that, at least from this group, and certainly going back to Halt's perspective, that would certainly be desirable if there was a way to do it. All right, so let's go ahead and close off the trails discussion. And so now we'll revert back to earlier in the outline to intended uses. I think this is relatively clear, but to the Seaboard folks, any additional comments with regards to intended uses?
No.
Okay, any comments or questions from the board? Any questions or comments from the public? Okay. Stormwater management. And I believe that there were a couple of minor open items in the beta review, but so the Seaboard folks, do you want to just go ahead and speak specifically to the stormwater management?
Sure, you just want a general description of the system or how we're managing stormwater, or do you want me to speak to the open comments? I don't know if anybody from Beta's.
Yeah, let's skip over the open comments for now since Beta's not here, but maybe a really, really quick description of how you're managing stormwater, and then I suspect that we might get a few questions on it. So quick overview to refresh people's memories would probably be great.
Sure. So in the northern portion of the site, we have a proposed infiltration basin located in this area right here. Stormwater runoff from this portion of the array is going to be directed to this stormwater basin. We're creating a small berm, a couple feet high, along this section of the driveway to kind of essentially funnel stormwater runoff from the undisturbed area and allow it to maintain its natural flow path through the forest on this side right here. So it's not impacting our proposed infiltration basin. So we're able to manage the size of this basin by adding this berm along here, and then we're providing a riprap swale along this end right through here to collect all the water from this section of the array and direct it to the stormwater basin. So we have a small or a graded swale on this end, a berm along this end, which allows us to direct stormwater from runoff from this portion of the system to this basin right through here.
Hey Nick, sorry,
Yes.
before you move on, that berm on the northern side, did you just make sure? I just want to make sure I understood this. Did you say that berm also keeps water from outside the area from moving into the stormwater collection area?
Correct. Yeah. So it's going to keep well, stormwater runoff patterns for this area. They're generally running in this direction, anyways, kind of up through here. So we figured with the plantings we're going to be proposing, a little additional height with the berm would also be helpful, along with the plantings we're proposing. And that also allows us to keep the stormwater runoff from the site, which, you know, it's going to, we have a gravel driveway. We have the runoff from the interior of the panels directed towards the basin, and everything else will just sheet flow on its natural path down towards the pond through this area. So everything's running relatively perpendicular to the pond right through here. So we're just only intercepting the water from our developed portion of the site in our basin.
But just to be clear, you're effectively diverting some of that flow that's outside of the site to a different pathway than it would have otherwise taken.
No, everything was always going, everything from this general area of the site coming all the way up through here, essentially up to the gas line easement, all runs towards the wetland or the pond. So the wetland borders on this existing pond right here, and this whole hill runs from this direction to that direction. We're essentially just separating out the developed portion to only go into our stormwater basin.
Got it. Thank you.
All right. Then we have this central portion of the array, which is going to be running down towards the driveway and off into, it's going to flow overland in this section right through here, this small area right along this area right through here. This area of the array is going to be traveling to a graded area. So you can see these little triangles here. We're making a small depression, and we're installing a 15-inch culvert, which is going to go under the driveway and tie into a stormwater swale, a riprap swale, which connects to this other infiltration basin right here. So essentially, as you follow this hand, this portion of the site is going to go to this pipe under the driveway, into the swale, into the basin. This small area right through here, with the way the existing grades are for this area, stormwater was running towards this existing residential lot. So to prevent any impacts to this existing residential dwelling, we installed a small stormwater basin in this area right here with a swale off the edge of the gravel driveway to collect any runoff from the developed array area. Will be collected in this swale and then go into this infiltration basin. And then there's a small outlet that kind of allows water if there are overflows to travel on their natural paths. So this area of the site up through here flows in this direction, where everything else is essentially flowing towards the central wetland, the intermittent stream, and the pond. So we wanted to make sure we addressed any flow that was directed towards, well, in its existing condition, is directed towards this residential abutter. So we wanted to make sure we had a small stormwater system in this area to prevent any stormwater issues, mitigate any impacts to their residential lot. So that's why this small system is right through here. The center portion of the property then flows to this existing riprap swale. There's a swale along here and a swale along this area right here, and it directs flows from this main area to this infiltration basin. And then as you come down through this area of the site, there's no proposed stormwater management basin. We do have a collection swale, which is going to collect in any runoff from the gravel driveway and direct it on its natural flow path towards this wetland area over here. There's no need for a infiltration basin per stormwater management calculations in this area, because as discussed previously, we're removing about 110,000 square feet of impervious cover in that paved area. That's all going to be loamed and seeded and planted. So its runoff characteristics are changed, and there'll be a much more surface infiltration, and therefore there's no requirement for a stormwater management basin. We'll still be collecting water in the swale, and the swale, all the swales actually have check dams to capture some any solids or and provide some stormwater treatment within the swale as it travels down towards its discharge point in this area right through here. And then there's no proposed modifications to this existing driveway area. That's going to remain as is. That all stormwater flows into existing stormwater management facilities as part of this existing development here. There is an existing 30-inch culvert which connects this wetland to this wetland, where the existing driveway for the test track goes over that. That's going to remain as is. There's no proposed modifications to that culvert. So that essentially sums up our proposed stormwater management system.
Thanks, Nick. Questions or comments from the planning board? Okay, and if we don't have any questions there, then I'll just open it up. Are there any questions or comments from the public with regards to stormwater management? Yes, Mr. Robertson. And I should say, Mr. Robertson, I apologize. I don't think I asked you before, but if you could please state your address.
Yes, Tom Robertson, 15 Fawn Ridge Road.
Go ahead, Tom.
Well, I don't think this is the right forum for discussion, because we don't have our experts to be able to opine on this and of the stormwater management, but it certainly, I hope, it strikes me as just techno arrogance that this very fragile wetlands area that's surrounded by these solar panels is going to be able to be effectively managed by the swales and the culverts and the berms, etc. And it strikes me as comments such as creating a berm to facilitate the natural quote unquote flow should say enough to everybody that certainly there's nothing natural about creating a berm to change flow. And so I believe that as far as the discussion on this and my myriad concerns with the stormwater management, and particularly given the amount of deforestation and grading that's going to necessarily occur, that this needs to be approached with some scrutiny from town experts and not from a layman like me who, having walked through the area, knows that this is going to be a big problem.
Yeah. So, Mr. Robertson, you're right, and I think that's why we enlist our own consultant to do this analysis. And to your point, I don't think we are making any decisions now, but from a process perspective, Seaboard will be providing. I believe they've committed to providing updated drawings to Beta. There are a couple of outstanding questions that Beta had on the previous review, and we do lean very heavily on our own consultant to make sure that the design is adequate to protect the natural resources and abutting properties. So I think you're right. There is more to come, and
May
we'll
I
have
add
to
one
wait for
thing?
another meeting. Yes, please go ahead.
I just did read some of what your experts or some of the documentation concerning it, and I'm going to quote something here. It says, by minimizing ground disturbance and site grading within the areas of proposed solar arrays to maintain existing site slopes and drainage paths to the maximum extent practical. And that is what is in the document that I believe was
just for reference, which
I believe that was level one that came up with that. It may have been Beta's response in quoting them, but my point being that that the words that are used and that the plan if the plan is being evaluated based upon maximum extent practical, okay, and that definition of maximum extent practical is left to the discretion of the developer, then we're in big trouble if it's not clearly monitored and maintained and financially bonded to make sure that that maximum extent practical is maximum extent acceptable. And so I'm hoping that the planning board, regardless of whether or not the Concom comes up with an acceptance of a proposal, is ready to assume the responsibility to impose such conditions on the project that ensures that it's designed and completed in a manner consistent with our public interest.
Absolutely.
The chair.
Yes, go ahead, Deb.
I think we should, well, there's two things. One is, I have some concerns about them draining the southern tier, the lowest southern tier into the wetlands. I consider that a faux pas. That could be a major determinant. The idea of a wetlands is that it's pure and innocent, and to disturb it with the gravel path draining into it, I think should be evaluated. But beyond that, I'm just wondering if Nick could talk to us a little bit about what's left over. What are the issues left over by Beta? Because I sort of looked at the letter from Beta, and I'm wondering if you could summarize it a little bit
So
for us.
I'm thinking that, to the discussion earlier, it's probably worth us leaving this item open for the time being until the next hearing when we can make sure that beta is available. And if we're going to ask them to comment on or to respond to beta's reaction, I just think it's going to be better that beta's here. So that's kind of does that seem reasonable, Deb?
Yeah, that's more than reasonable. I just
Okay.
curious,
And
but
Nick, is that reasonable to you? I just don't want to get into a broad discussion and then have to repeat it or redo it when beta is here to represent us on these
No,
issues.
I agree. And as I stated before, we're going to be formally responding to these minor outstanding items with a letter to Beta and to the planning board. There'll be a few minor plan changes. We'll be issuing an updated plan set to go along with that.
Okay.
thank you, Gary.
All right. Before we move on, and again, we'll go ahead and leave the stormwater management open, but any other comments from either the board or from the public? Okay. So let's move forward to site lighting. So Nick, again, if you just want to quickly hit on the highlights of any site lighting that you have planned for.
Sure, we are proposing no site lighting for the solar array. There's existing lights that are within this existing parking lot area. So our access driveway will inherently be lit by those existing lights, but there are no proposed lighting features for the solar array.
Okay. And I see that someone who's called in, and normally we would take the planning board comments first, but I suspect that this person might be calling with regards to stormwater management. So whoever it is, if you can state your name and your address, then the floor is yours. And I see you've been unmuted. It's 508-625-2096.
Yeah, that's me, Ann Karnofsky at 132 East Main Street.
Go ahead, Ann.
My comment would not be specifically about stormwater management. I am against having deforestation in favor of a solar farm. I think there could be a better site that Seaboard Solar could find and not destroy a living, mature forest. And I understand that they would plant arbor vitae as so-called screening, which does not belong at all in that environment.
So, Ann, can I interrupt you for just a second? And I apologize, but we are doing our best to stick to an outline here. And we do have a topic later in the agenda specifically related to limit of disturbance and tree clearing. And so
I just have one thing to say. I don't see the major lake or pond there. Do they purposely keep that off the diagram?
Nick, do you want to comment on that?
No, it's right here. This is the pond. This is the wetland that borders the pond. And it comes down and all the way up through here.
Certainly is not illuminated. Okay, how do I go about being heard later?
The same way you did here. When we get to that, the relevant topic, then you can just go ahead and hit the *9 and your hand will be raised in the system and we'll go ahead and call on you.
Okay, so I just keep the registration the way it was and then I have to press *9 a second time now.
Yes.
Later.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ann. Okay, back to site lighting. No lighting is proposed. Any questions or comments from the board? Any questions or comments from the public?
Gary, I had my hand up.
Oh, yes. Sorry, Deb.
Right,
Sorry, I'm keeping track of the participants here that use the digital hand raising and the people that are raising their hand on the screen. So go ahead.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, I just want to know a little bit, not knowing exactly what's out there, and that this building, I'm not sure, but was it mostly used in the daytime when it was existing as the insurance company?
So
In Liberty Mutual. So I guess what I'm trying to come up to is, is the existing lighting going to be on at night?
So I think that that's a different parcel that's not part of our hearing tonight,
No,
because it's
well,
actually been
their
legally
access,
split out.
yeah, they said that the access drive was lit. Nick just said that.
Yep. From previous lighting.
Yeah, he said previous lighting was there, and I just wanted to get a clarification as to whether that lighting would be on at night.
If I can answer that question,
Sure. Yeah, well, I'll let Pedro answer that. He's managing the property at Lot 1.
yeah, I believe there are some safety lights located on the driveway right now that are on during the night. Those are the ones that are gonna remain, but what it is right now in the building, that's what it's going to be after, if the project is approved and built, nothing else is going to be added.
Oh, so they're the ones in Lot 1. There's no lights on the access drive.
We're not gonna add anything to it. There's some lightings in the access drive already for safety. You can see them if you go at night on the building, just so you can see the driveway as you drive in, but they're minimal. We're not gonna add anything else. They're there for safety.
And they're downcasting?
I believe so, yes, I believe so.
Want to make sure. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay. So sounds like Pedro, if you guys could just confirm that those are downcasting, that would be helpful to us. Okay. Utilities, water utilities, as well as water and sewer use. So Nick, if you just want to give us an update, and I think I can just preempt this by saying that if you can specify utilities underground, above ground, if they're above ground, where they're above ground, that'll probably save at least one question from the board.
Sure. So for the record, there are no proposed water or sewer connections or utilities, septic systems associated with the development of the solar array. All conduit is located underground. As Pedro previously discussed, we do have an area where we're looking to possibly have an above ground crossing to get over the gas line easement. We've actually been in conversations with the utility company about doing a mounded trench. So they would allow us to bury the line, but it would be mounded at grade. So we essentially raise the grade of this area about a foot or two, and then we would install our conduits in that raised grade portion. We're still working out the details. It may have to be an overhead connection, which is how we're proposing it as of today. We're looking for possible approval with this section being an overhead, two utility poles and overhead wiring to span this area. We're working with the utility company and doing our best to try and keep that underground so it's not an overhead connection, but we do not have a final answer from the utility on if we'll be able to do that or not. So for now, we're going to assume that it's required to be overhead span of approximately 80 feet with two utility poles in this area. So the main lines then come down. We're going to be running all the main conduit down the center of the gravel access driveway. Everything's going to come to the main power bank where the batteries and transformers will be situated in this area. We're then going to have an underground trench, which runs along the edge of the existing paved driveway, which brings the conduit to Franklin Road. At that point, we'll be coming out of the ground and connecting to the existing power utility infrastructure via overhead lines at this point. right here.
Okay, I think first up we have a question from Amy. Or
Yeah,
comment?
the area with the gas easement, I believe that there's a trail there too, correct? Through the
Yes, there is a trail there.
so whether the utilities are mounted on the ground or above, this trail will still be passable. I just want to.
Yeah, the trail will still be accessible. You know, it would be mounted, and we would taper the.
It'd be not a big slope that people could walk over it.
Correct, and the utility company still, you know, they're still required to be able to access this and drive maintenance vehicles down this pathway if needed. So yeah, the mound would be, it'd be noticeable, but it wouldn't be impassable. You could definitely, you know, anybody hiking through the trails would be able to get over the mound if we're allowed to make that style of crossing. That's what we're looking to do, but we can't say for sure if the utility company will let us do that.
All right, Dave.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question and actually a suggestion and a question. So the suggestion is that currently we're showing no waivers required for this, and I think that should be updated for a waiver for the overhead utilities.
Okay.
John, are you good with that too, John?
I think the Cedar Street one had the same.
Yeah, I just wanted to call it out as a waiver. That's all.
I agree.
Yep. Does that make sense, John? John's nodding his head yes.
Okay. So my second question, and I think this is the best time to ask it. So I know they cut back on a few of the solar panels, and it's currently listed document as a 5 megawatt and 28 acres. So I was just curious how those numbers are, the new updated numbers for those.
So in response to your question, we're at about 23 acres of site disturbance, and we're at approximately 4 megawatts with the current system output. So I'd like to go back to the crossing. Pedro just notified me that the utility company has agreed to allow them to go underground or create the mound. It was a miscommunication between Pedro and I. I apologize for that. I thought that was still being negotiated. So we will actually not be looking to have above ground wiring over the gas easement. We'll be providing a mound with conduit essentially located at grade, and there'll be a mound over that to provide proper cover over those utilities. We'll be addressing that in our revised plan set, and there'll be a construction detail provided for this area, which shows how the conduit will be installed over this area of the gas easement. Once again, I apologize. I thought that was still being negotiated, but apparently I was wrong.
So just a follow-up comment, Mr. Chair.
Yep, go ahead.
So I know this is going to sound weird, me sticking up for a solar farm, but I just want to point out that what the applicant just said, that there are actually 5 acres less of solar panels in disturbed area from 28 acres to 23 acres. And they also reduced their whole solar panel output by a whole megawatt. So they went from 5 megawatts to 4 megawatts. So I think that's worth recognizing. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or comments from the board on utilities? What about the public? Are there any questions or, oh, sorry, Jane. Go ahead, Jane.
Just to follow up on Amy's comment, if there is this mound for the trails, I'm assuming, and it's probably a no-brainer, but I just want to clarify it, that there's kind of like a ramp or a slope of the high point of the mound, so that it's easier for people to traverse.
Yep, that's not a problem.
Okay, thank you, Pedro.
Okay. Any comments or questions from the public related to utilities? Okay. The next item is parking lot layout, dumpster location, snow storage, snow removal. I know we've already talked a little bit about the desire for some trail parking, but Nick, any other comments on this item 6 in the outline?
So, no proposed dumpster located on the property. Essentially, maintenance staff would haul any trash out with them on the days that they do go to maintain the parcels, maintain the landscaping, grass clippings, any trash they collect will be brought out with them. Other than that, there's no public access or anticipated staff access to the array other than the routine maintenance staff. So we feel the need for a dumpster is not there. Seaboard owns and operates multiple solar sites, and none of them have dedicated dumpsters located on the property. With regards to parking layout, there's really no parking lot, so I think we'll avoid that one. Snow storage, the revised site plan set did include snow storage. I'll show you on, let's see, let me get to a adequate page here where we can, sorry, the plan set's 26 pages long. So, oops. So these are the most recent plans submitted. So we have multiple small snow storage areas identified like this in areas that are within the limits of clearing, within the fence line, but are not covered by panels. So we have multiple small snow storage areas, such as here, 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 and they continue throughout the property. I can highlight more if you'd like me to.
I'm fine with that.
And that was also a comment in the original beta review letter, and that's been thoroughly addressed based on their current letter. They said that that topic has been fully addressed.
Any comments or questions from the board or from the public? Okay. Noise, specifically HVAC exhaust systems and screening of HVAC if applicable.
Mr. Chair, Tom Robertson had raised his hand.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Robertson.
Yeah, so just a point of clarification, I understood from one of the previous meetings that there was not planned to be any snow removal from the panels. And now we're talking about snow removal areas, so I'm just wanting to get clarification. Are these panels going to be scraped or whatever you do, or are they going to be left alone during the snow season?
And I,
So the snow storage areas are for maintaining access within the gravel driveway areas. Snow will not be removed from the interior of the panels. The terrain isn't going to be leveled and graded in a fashion where you could drive a snowplow truck down here to clean these aisles out. You need, they're mostly accessed with an ATV or other 4x4 style vehicle for maintenance purposes only of the panels. The storage areas are for snow that falls on the gravel access driveway. As you can see here in gray, there's a decent amount of gravel access driveway. So we do have multiple snow storage areas where the plow can easily push snow from the gravel driveway into the array. We're not encouraging any snow storage within the buffer zone areas or along areas where we have environmentally sensitive areas. So, snow storage will be in this area along the driveway, in this area over here, in this area here, and so on and so forth along the perimeter of the driveway. And that's only for gravel access maintenance only.
Okay.
Okay. So going back to the next item, noise, HVAC exhaust systems, and screening of HVAC if applicable. But Nick, any comments on that?
Well, we have no HVAC systems, but we do have some ground-mounted equipment, transformers, inverters, the battery storage system. There's one utility pad located in this area, which was previously located here, but we decided to move that as far south as possible to provide a greater buffer in this area here. Noise from this is minimal. I'll let Pedro speak to the specifics on that. But the other area is located, where most of the equipment is in this area right through here. And that's, our only neighbor for, 600 feet is essentially the existing office building. We're set back pretty far from Franklin Road with our battery storage for this area. But I'll let Pedro speak to the noise levels that these equipment can produce.
Pedro, before you get into that, maybe it's worth combining this discussion with building design. And I don't know if there are any buildings there, but just a little bit of overview of what those pads consist of, and we can probably cross off item 9 on the list at the same time.
Oh, okay. So regarding the noise pollution, just to make clear, the loudest equipment that we're going to have on site is going to be 60 decibels at 1 meter in a 25 degrees Celsius weather. That means that it creates kind of like a humming sound, and you can hear it as close as 50 feet. So if you're 60 feet away from it, you're not going to hear anything. Regarding the pads, all the electrical equipment is going to be mounted on precast concrete pads. Simple as that.
Okay, so even where the battery storage is, there's no building or shelter or structure or anything for that?
The energy storage, we actually submitted a detailed package to that, and I can go into greater detail maybe in the next meeting. I can bring my energy storage expert, but the basic information is that the energy storage system already has its own container, its own suppression system, and all you have to do is install the precast concrete, and the box just goes on top of it. There's no extra plumbing, no extra utility, no extra building required for that.
Okay.
So if I can add one thing.
Yeah, go ahead, Nick.
So they're essentially going to be, they look like shipping containers. They're shipping containers that are over-engineered. They have fire suppression systems that are built into them. They have venting systems built into them. And we'll be coordinating with the fire department on the installation and essentially the safety features that are associated with these battery containment systems, because I know there are typically a lot of questions that come up with public safety with regards to the battery storage systems. But as far as structures go, they're going to be delivered and they're going to be essentially going to be rolled off the tractor trailer as a shipping container. That's what it's going to look like, but it's going to have multiple safety features associated with it. The remaining pads are just going to be holding transformers. It's, as you would typically see for a transformer pad, or there'll be some inverters which are also contained. So that's the extent of the structures or equipment and the size and how it's going to look.
Okay, I think Deb has a question. Deb, go ahead.
Hi, to the engineers. For these shipping containers, do you use in the connections to the pads vibration isolation like you would on a roof to reduce the sound? What you typically are is you've got your angle cut down and you've got a rubber dampener, and then that's connected to the concrete. Is that something that you've considered? It helps with the decibels quite a bit.
I can't speak specifically to the design of the battery storage system. I mean, those are details that are typically ironed out once we get to a building permit submission package. I mean, the system hasn't been
It's
fully
not,
engineered.
it's not the system, it's the connection from the system to the concrete pad.
I'll let Pedro address that.
Yeah.
I believe it's something he can look into, and I guess we can get back to you on. Is that okay, Pedro?
Yeah, that's perfectly fine. They're all standard installations and connections, but I will look up the manufacturer's section drawing so you can see exactly how is that connected to the concrete pad. And
And
also meet that before the meeting.
just to
Yeah.
confirm, Deb, is your primary concern noise by having that isolation, or is it something different than noise?
Well, the noise can also lead to vibration considerations, but when it's not separated or isolated, so what it is it's a wedge of rubber.
Yep, I
And,
understand.
Yeah, and it works great, and I'd love to see that detail included here.
I guess I'm just curious. I just want to make sure they can address your question, but what are you concerned about that you want to see the
Sound.
sound? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Amy.
Yeah, I was just going to bring up about the sound. I looked up what 60 decibel was because I wasn't sure, and it says that's the sound of a dishwasher or normal conversation. And so, since these are, I think they're hundreds of feet away from anyone that could hear it. I don't think I'm not hugely concerned about noise in this location.
correct.
But the rubber pad, I mean, sounds fine if that's doable.
My dishwasher's really quiet.
Mine is too.
What date was that chart?
All right. So any other questions or comments either from the board or for the public with regards to noise, or, and I know there are containers, but we'll include those in the building design category on section 6.9. Yes, Mr. Robertson.
Thank you. This is a question about noise, not on the ongoing usage, but the noise of the actual development and construction. Is this addressed in a different topic, or are we including noise during that phase, particularly during our shelter at home times here, where my wife and myself are working at home, and my daughter and the children in the neighborhood are taking school here at home? That's a big issue should this move forward.
So we do have in our standard construction bylaws, we have limits on the hours of which they can operate. And those are, I believe, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Monday through Friday, and 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. I believe on Saturdays. Is that right, John? So that's
correct.
Okay. So that's
I understand that, but this is a sort of an unusual circumstance where you have a power plant being built in our backyards. It's not really something that I think the bylaw is really considered. It's one thing to have a home being constructed next to you and operating during those hours. It's a different thing to have, 30 acres being transformed.
Yeah. Okay. Point noted.
Thank you.
Okay. So I think that no other comments. Oh, sorry, Mr. Costa. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just thought it might be worthwhile, since Mr. Robertson asked the question, for us to address the anticipated construction schedule as it relates to noise. And I'm happy to do it now, or happy to do it at the appropriate time if now is not that time.
Sure. Since he brought up the question, why don't you go ahead and talk about it now?
So Pedro, do you want to speak to your construction schedule and the speed with which a project of this sort is generally developed, from site preparation to actual installation of the panels? Because I know that those who are not necessarily familiar with solar projects tend to liken it to a subdivision or a commercial or mixed use development, where very often from site preparation to total completion, it could be anywhere from 6 months to 6 years. Pedro, do you want to speak to a project of this sort and what the construction schedule would be like?
Yes, so the entire time frame for for the construction of this project will probably be around 6 months. The loudest or the busiest time of construction is going to be during the civil work, which is the tree clearing, the minimal grading, the installation of the detention basins, installation of the roads. That can take up to 2 to 3 months. After that, you're not going to see a lot of workers on site. It's just going to be maybe a dozen of workers with what's it called? It's almost like how do you explain it? But it's almost like a big screw driver going out and putting holes and a machine behind it, installing the racking system. They go like Legos. So after the civil is done, you're really not gonna see as much movement. You're not gonna hear a lot coming from the side. The actual installation of the solar panels takes about 3 to 4 months, and they do not require a lot of workers or heavy equipment.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, let's go ahead and move forward to section 6.8. Hopefully this is a quick one, but crosswalk location or sidewalks. Any comments?
We don't have any proposed crosswalks or sidewalks associated with the project.
Any questions or comments from the planning board or from the public? Okay. Next item, so we talked about 6.9, the building design. Next item would be 6.10, the signage. What do you have planned for signage at the site?
So right now, we're essentially proposing signage for the property be located right here. It'll be mounted to the security fence, and it's mostly security and public safety signage. There'll be a site plan showing the layout of the array, probably a 2x3 sign showing the locations of the stormwater basins, the ground mounted equipment for public safety to be able to use if they have to access the site in an emergency, so they know where certain features of the site are located. There'll also be a sign with information about the project operator and property owner located in this area, with contact information with regards to the project. Pedro, is there any other signage that is proposed?
No, that's pretty much it. I mean, mainly the site plan, it shows where the main disconnect is in case there's some type of emergency. The fire department or the utility can go to the site, can easily locate where the main disconnect is placed. But we usually, before we install them, we show the signs with the building permit application to the fire department, the police department, see if they have any other comments, and we include them.
Okay, thank you. Jane, yes, go ahead.
Sure, if the proponent is willing to scrape out a public access parking lot, it would be helpful just to have a trail access head parking sign at that location, if it comes to that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions from either the board or from the public on signage? Okay, let's go ahead and move on to 6.11, and that would be impacts on schools, other municipal services, value of neighboring residential properties, and wildlife corridors. Nick, do you have any overarching comments on any of those topics?
So with regards to schools and municipal services, essentially no impact on the school system. Municipal services, we're not connecting to any public utilities that would need to be serviced. Access to the site is from Franklin Road, and we would hope that Franklin Road is maintained in its current fashion with regards to snow removal, but we're not looking for any other services associated with access to the site, which would burden the local community. I'll jump to wildlife and wildlife corridors. We're still in the process of our Conservation Commission hearings, and we'll be dealing with those topics. As stated, there is a vernal pool located in this area, and we've also done a habitat evaluation of the buffer zones as requested by the Conservation Commission. We can provide the planning board a copy of that habitat analysis if they'd like to see it. A quick summary on it is the conclusion is, while these areas are being cleared and there'll be minor impacts to wildlife in these areas, the provided open space will in fact be a benefit. The dedicated open space will be a benefit to the area, with the minor impact of wildlife having to relocate to the open spaces. As I stated, we can provide a copy of that report. And I also did a little bit of research in the area and pulled up the state's biomap, which they have a dedicated document for Hopkinton of wildlife corridors and things of that nature. And this property is not located in any identified wildlife corridor, which is protected or identified in the state's Biomap 2 program. I can also provide a copy of that to the board if they would like that documentation.
Nick, you're providing a 6-inch wildlife gap beneath the fencing, is that correct?
That is correct. And the fencing detail, as requested, has been modified to provide the requested 6-inch wildlife gap.
Thank you.
And Nick, can you address the landscaping along the boundaries of the project, specifically the northern boundary with regard to the adjacent cul-de-sac and residential homes? Because one of the other items on the list of topics that the chairman just read was neighboring property values. And can you talk about the distance to those neighboring properties and then landscaping?
Sure. So this landscaping plan that we developed here, we pulled the locations of the existing residential dwellings off of Fawn Ridge Road, which directly abut our development, and provided some existing distances to where our limit of clearing is proposed to be, which is essentially the edge of the existing trail network. So as you can see here, our closest neighbor their dwelling is approximately 250 linear feet from our edge of disturbance area. And as Adam stated, we are proposing new landscaping all through this area, in addition to the extended buffer, which we're providing by reducing the size of the proposed system to provide a greater visual buffer directly against the fencing and screen some of that initial view of the solar array. So we have 2 layers of plantings all through this area along the trail network. We don't have any plantings up through this section right here, as we are within a wetland buffer zone and are trying to minimize our site disturbance. So we felt that it didn't make sense to clear more areas to put more plantings in. So we're going to maintain this existing vegetative buffer through here. And we're also proposing plantings along this westerly boundary through here. With regards to setbacks to existing dwellings, on the southerly portion of the site, we have the existing dwelling at 54 Franklin Road. Our limit of clearing on the northerly part is approximately 325 linear feet to the dwelling, to our proposed limit of clearing, and 462 linear feet along the easterly side to our limit of clearing on this end. With regards to the front of the property, we have some existing residences in this area. I provide a dimension right here to, this is the edge of the existing paved parking area or test track. So we'll be removing that pavement and providing some additional plantings and wetland buffer zone mitigation in this area. So we're going to be providing a grass seed mix that's made for buffer zone areas to essentially rehabilitate this area for wetland buffer purposes because it's currently paved right now. As you can see here, we have an existing dwelling located at 67 Franklin Road, and they are about 240 feet to the edge of that existing paved parking lot area. This entire area is going to remain wooded. This is wetland and wetland buffer zone where there'll be no clearing or proposed land disturbance activities. And then we have the dwellings that are located across the street from Franklin Road, and we're approximately 324 feet from this existing residence right through here with our proposed work, and 475 feet from this existing dwelling right here.
Nick, just out of curiosity, do you know how the elevations, or the total elevations of the arrays compare to the abutting properties? And I think all of us are probably sensitive to the commercial solar farm over off of Alexander, in a different neighborhood where it goes up a hill, which results in a pretty strong impact on those properties. So I wonder if you could just speak to elevations and how they relate to the abutting properties.
Sure, let me. So this sheet shows 15 Fawn Ridge. So based on our current survey, they're about, this is elevation up through here is 380 to 370. So it's about a 10-foot drop along this area. And, if you run in a straight line from that area where the house is, up through here, we are roughly at that same grade, 380 to about 370. So there's no steep incline. It's roughly running at the same elevation as we enter the abutting parcels. The property in the back here, I believe, I can't speak to it because I haven't been out there in about 5 months. I believe it's relatively level through this area. There's no steep grade or steep drop off. If there's any abutters, I'll let them chime in once I'm done here and provide some additional information on that. So we have that area. So it's roughly the same grade as the existing grade is here. There is a little dip. I do recall on our site walk, there was a little bit of a dip through here, a couple feet, and then it kind of goes back up. And I believe at the back of this property, they have a pool and the backyard area up through here. But this is all the dedicated open space from the Fawn Ridge development up through this area right through here. So this is all naturally vegetated and will not be cleared for, I believe it's a distance of 100 feet, which is dedicated open space. And that's essentially addresses how the grades are through that back area.
Okay. Thanks, Nick. In a actually, let's do this. Before we get to the public, any questions or comments from the board? Jane, yes?
Through the chair, is this a proper time to address what type of screening, what species that they'll be planting in that area or not at a different time?
Yeah, let's go ahead and do that. I know that just a time check, we're at 9:35 now. Since we've already broached the topic of screening, if it's okay with everyone, let's go ahead and if we can close out the 6:11 and maybe 6:16, then maybe that's a good place to call it a day. Does that seem
Did we ask
reasonable
for
to everyone?
Did we ask for public comment on 6:11?
We haven't yet. We haven't
I
yet.
think that's important.
Okay. So let's go ahead and do that, Jane. Let's.
Okay.
Amy, the only reason I was contemplating merging them only because screening has, I think, potentially some correlation or some impact on property values, but
Sure.
we'll go ahead and split it out. And so it looks like Ms. Karnowski has her hand raised.
Yes, yes.
So go ahead.
Well, I did mention before that the company mentioned pine trees, and I think by that they mean arborvitae, a very inappropriate type of vegetation to put in that forest. And then I have two other quick comments before they comment on that. I have been in touch with the Attorney General's Division of Environmental Protection, and it seems there is a general state problem of solar companies taking valuable forested land, deforesting it, and putting their arrays there, and getting state tax breaks for it. And I think the Attorney General's office may take this on. They may put an end to this project. And I have to wait to hear from them this coming week. And the third thing is I urge the planning board to make a site visit to Oxford, Mass, in the vicinity of south of Hopkinton, to look over another project which was done by Seaboard Solar, which has caused great disruption. Okay, so the three things is please make a site visit to Oxford, Mass, and know that the Attorney General's office has been contacted on this. And let's not have any arborvitae put in for screening. That's all.
Okay. Thank you, Ann. Appreciate your patience and your comments.
Through the chair, can I ask why she didn't want the arborvitae?
Because it's cheap and inappropriate, and those are usually put in when you have some kind of parking lot or automotive industry to surround it. That is not what this forest is.
Okay, thanks. I just wanted to make sure it wasn't because of the deer eating that, because they now make.
It may also be. It may also be.
Okay.
The chair, they do make deer-resistant arborvitae that everybody's using.
Yep. Okay. So we're going to talk about screening in just a couple minutes. So we'll just hold off on that specific question. But Muriel, did you have a comment or a question specifically related to the item 6.11?
6.11, is that screening? I'm sorry, I was looking for the solar
Nope.
Location.
Sorry, we're still on impacts on schools, municipal services, value of neighboring residential properties, and wildlife.
Yeah, my comment is really for the screening, so I'll wait.
Okay. Mr. Robertson, did you have a comment or a question with regards to impact on schools, municipal services, residential property values, or wildlife? And John will be unmuting you now. Go ahead, Tom.
I guess the first thing I have to say is, I mean, this is such a, for one agenda item, dealing with those 4 issues is like, it's a mouthful, because obviously those are very important issues. But I'm going to confine my comments to just a couple of points that were made by other speakers. And one is that, you know, the wildlife being able to migrate to the newly developed open areas is sort of a misconception, because those are open areas right now as far as the wildlife is concerned. And so they're not migrating there. They're, if anything, displacing what's already there as far as wildlife goes, and that should be made clear. And the second thing is, you know, as far as property values, this is a big issue for both the character of the town and the appearance from the property, the noise disruption, and whatever. There's all sorts of pieces that go into that I don't think can simply be dealt with by screening. But it sounds like we're not talking about screening, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you know, as far as the screening go, Ann talked about the arborvitaes being the wrong, you know, the wrong planting for maintaining the character of the site. And I would agree with her, is that, you know, when we look out our back window, we look at the forest, and a row of hedges is not the forest. And I think we'll all agree that. And I think that if I know in other webcasts that see Muriel's backyard, and I'm sure that she appreciates her forest view as we've seen it, and a hedge of varieties would not be her preference either. So, but if that's for another day, and we'll talk about that. But I do think that if there is screening, that it needs to be detailed and budgeted for and bonded for if they go that route. Thank you.
Okay. Frank, did you have sorry, Pedro, did you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly address the landscape design. So the trees that we propose are noted here in the landscaping plan, which is part of the plan set that we submitted. These are the typical trees that we have used in the past. They are very tree resistant, they're hardy. They're not the cheapest tree you can find. But again, we send this landscaping plan to HUD. We send it to the trail committee. We are open for suggestions. If the planning board, or if any of the neighbors have any suggestions for the trees that they want in the landscaping, we have no problem addressing that.
Okay, thank you, Pedro.
And just to add one more thing, is just to clarify, like Nick said before, this landscaping is going to be right next to the solar arrays in between the trails and the fence. And this is besides the natural buffer that is between our project and the current houses.
Okay, thanks, Pedro. Frank, might need to unmute you.
So
Right.
I just want to say this about arborvitae. That there are many types of trees and plantings that can be done. As a member of the Conservation Commission, arborvitae is a major way that we go for screening. For people to understand, it's just not one type of anything. And I'm really glad that the developer is willing to work with the neighbors to help them select what would work best for them and their properties. And this is that opportunity when we talk more specifically about it, and we get down to brass tacks about what can be done. But what I'm hearing is a lot of arborvitaes for automobiles and all that. No, Attorney General's office, this or that. No, this is the board that's hearing this project, and we're working with the neighbors and a developer to find the best answer and the best solution. So if there's something that you don't specifically like, there has to be a reason that's offered that we can work with, not simply because you don't like it. So my suggestion is to work with the developer and do a little research about what does work in this circumstance, because yes, backyard views are very important, but it's also their property, and then your property meet at a certain point, and your rights meet at a certain point, and this board has to determine what works best for everyone. So that's my opinion about Arbor Vitae. And otherwise, I think the process is going pretty well, and I'm really glad a developer has come around and heard a lot of what's been said and responded. So I hope that continues, and thank everyone for their time tonight. That's my comment.
Right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Frank. Amy.
I just wanted to note, I think our bylaw states that it must provide an effective year-round screen. And does Beta specifically comment on that, these types of trees mentioned provides an effective year-round screen? They look like evergreens to me. It's predominantly hemlock, some arborvitae, some balsam, some red cedar, some Fraser fir. Those look like the types.
They look like all look like evergreens to me. Also.
Yeah, so I'd be just curious if in Beta's opinion that provided an effective year-round screen, because we did not really get an effective screening on Alexander.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was really, through the chair, the question that I wanted to make sure we address. This is our first time really discussing the issue of needing to screen neighboring residential properties since that bylaw went into place. And I just want to make sure that we have a system in place that ensures it's an effective screen year round. And part of the challenge is that right now the property, the buffers between them doesn't have to screen anything. It's lovely back there, right? But it's not necessarily going to screen the neighbors from a commercial solar farm view. Once those trees come down and solar panels go up, that natural landscape isn't screening the neighboring residential properties from the solar panels. We know that because when we walked out there, we could see from that property up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And just a reminder that if people from the public want to comment, the best way to do that is if you click on the participant panel at the bottom, then it'll pop up with a separate box, and you can click raise your hand. Edward, if you could just state your name and address after John unmutes you. Go ahead, Edward. Edward, are you there? He is unmuted, but Edward, we can't hear you. So let's just go ahead and leave him unmuted, and we'll move on to the next person, which would be Dave.
Yeah, hi, just a quick question for the applicant. I know that the green giant arborvitae is deer resistant, but I'm not sure about the western arborvitae. So if they don't know the answer to that question, could they just check on it?
I'll check on it.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Robertson.
Yes, we we are speaking about screening. We have not been contacted by Seaboard as either myself as an abutter or as the homeowners association as a group about screening and what that would entail, or what our preferences were, or what we required on that. And it is important to us because, as Muriel just mentioned, you know, that trail that you're referring to has been, for the 18 years I've been here, it's had hikers and bikers and horse riders, and we wave to them. So it is a major concern for us. And what kind of screening if that's what's required, is important. And also, if there is screening, like I said, a budget and a bond to ensure that that happens is important, because as Ann mentioned, other communities such as Oxford and other areas where Seaboard has participated have found that they have been promised screening and have gotten very little in return.
Okay.
So I think that those two things need to be taken into consideration as you evaluate the permit.
So, Pedro, would you be willing to reach out to the abutters to
Yeah, of
meet with
course.
them specifically about screening?
Yeah, of course. I don't know if they can see it, but I just put my email in the chat. I know that after the first meeting, I went around and I gave my business cards to everyone that accepted it. And I have been in touch with a few neighbors that accepted my business cards, but I don't remember talking to you, Tom. But my email is in the chat. I don't know if you can see it or not. Please reach out to me and we can work on the details for the landscaping and take it from there.
And John Gilsich, our town planner, has your contact information as well. So if anybody wanted to reach out to you through John, I'm assuming they can do that as well.
Yep, thank you.
I'm going to go a little bit out of order here, but I think I see Mr. Ober has been raising his hand on the screen down there. So John, could we unmute Gail Ober?
Hi.
And just for the record, if you can state your name and your address.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. How are you all?
Good.
Scott Ober, Gail Ober, 17 Conrad Road, neighbor to Tom, one of the two major abutters on this project. I've heard a lot of discussion just now about.
Whoa.
Hey, Scott. Scott, we're getting a really bad echo.
Is he on his phone and his computer?
No,
Nope.
Oh,
might be a phone. Take it away. Is that better?
That's much better. Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, good. We can hear you now.
Right. So I've heard a lot of back and forth right now about trees and things like that, but it doesn't appear that anyone wants to touch the value of neighboring residential properties. I don't know if it's being intentionally avoided or we just haven't gotten there yet. But obviously, my neighbors and myself, that's our primary concern. In addition to the fact that we're all on well water, I'll say that again, and I don't believe a study's been done on what the impact on our well water will be from this power plant being put in our backyards. And secondly, I don't know if you're planning on getting to the principal planner's comments at some point. It's obviously not going to happen tonight, but is that going to be kicked over to the next meeting?
So we have heard our principal planner's comments.
Well, I haven't heard any discussion about the visual depiction of the view from Fawn Ridge and Franklin. Did I miss that, or has that been provided?
I'm not sure I quite follow you.
Okay.
What are you asking for?
I'm asking for the visual. It's number 3 of the principal planner's comments in the package. Okay.
So section 2.
Yes. Yep. I got it.
Item
Thank
number
you. Yes.
Okay. Where is that?
Got it.
Has that been provided?
We have not discussed at
That's
the
okay.
meeting tonight.
Yep. Okay, is that going to be discussed? And is that going to be provided?
John, so I know, I believe we talked about your initial comments at the first hearing, but I'm curious, do you have any updates specifically to your comments?
No specific updates, no. I mean, there's been new information provided specifically with comment 6 that the seed mix is different. These are all just comments that I've put forth in front of the board, and the board can act on them or not act on them. They're not required for the applicant to provide this information unless the board makes it required. But that information has not been provided to my knowledge.
Okay. And Mr. Ober, just for your information, and this is why we go through the outline. So I think that specific to point number 3 in terms of visual depictions, I think that relates very, very well to screening. So I think that's a fair question to ask, if the applicant is willing to provide I'm not sure how they would do it, but a visual depiction of the view from Fawn Ridge and Franklin Street.
Okay, so Gary, when we went on the site walk that Saturday,
yep,
part of that site walk was supposed to be to walk to our neighborhood and view it from our neighborhood. And I believe Pedro said he was going to do that. And I'm just asking if it's been done and whether they have to do this or not, based on what John just said. He asked for a visual depiction of the view from Fawn Ridge and Franklin. Now, if they didn't have to do that, why are we even asking for it?
Again, to John's point, those are recommendations of things that might be helpful. And I'll defer. I guess I'll pass it over to Pedro to see if that's something that they would be willing to do. It's not a requirement as part of our application process to do that, but to John's point, it might be helpful.
Yeah, just for the record, we haven't seen any of these principal planners comments, so I was not aware of it. Yeah, we have no problem doing the that type of survey, but just so we're all clear, we will need permission to go to your property to survey that portion.
That's fine.
Okay.
Like I said, I thought this had all been discussed a couple of months ago. I'm sure Tom would agree, as the major abutters on this, we want to see that done, because not doing that further enhances how this is detrimental to our neighborhood. And it's just ammunition. It's ammunition that I might have to use at a later date. So
I'm sorry,
I would love to see that happen. I don't see why it wouldn't. It's our property values that are going to be affected. It's detrimental to our neighborhood. And I think Seaboard, in good faith, should do everything they can to put the abutters' mind to ease the best that they can. And
So,
when I hear,
Mr. Ober, I'm going to cut you off because I think that Pedro just agreed that he would be willing to do that. So
I
I'm not sure
understand.
what point you're arguing.
I just, because I don't even know why it has to be discussed. It should just have already been done. They said they were going to do it. And if I didn't just bring it up, it just wouldn't have been done. How many
That's the
other
purpose
things
of a
are
public
there?
hearing to work through this. We're not going to debate that anymore. They've agreed to do it. So I don't need you to antagonize here.
I'm not trying to antagonize anybody. It's a very frustrating procedure for us right now in our current world environment, and now we have to be under the gun with a power plant being put in our backyard. It doesn't seem right. The timing of this couldn't be worse. And I just want to, and my final point is, who is going to ensure that Seaboard does all the things they promised they're going to do? Who's going to ensure that?
Yeah, when Gary,
Yeah.
in other towns and whatever, I know you want to continue on, but in other towns, nothing has been done that was promised. So who oversees this to ensure that every single
Okay,
thing-
hang on a second here. So we're not just going to speak at will here. So we have a process. There are ongoing inspections. The applicant, if this board moves forward, they are required to put forth a bond. There are a number of steps to ensure, and they've also, at least verbally thus far, committed to guaranteeing the landscaping and trail maintenance and other things. So as part of this process, there are a number of conditions that we will discuss. And if this project is approved, there are conditions and requirements that they have to meet. And we do have some ability to influence what those conditions are as to what needs to be required. So just like any other building project in town, there are a number of checks and balances which are intended. They're not always perfect, and that's why we want to be as diligent, and that's why we have some very comprehensive discussions with That's why we enable a lot of public input at this process, because we're all wanting to make sure that whatever this project ends up becoming is most beneficial to the town and has the least negative impact on the community.
Through the chair, just a question about process.
Yep, go ahead, Dave.
I know you wanted to try to stop around 9:30, and I think we're way past that, so I might suggest that we can
Yeah.
wrap it.
I candidly, I was hoping to at least get through the impact piece and possibly screening. I do see a number of people that have raised their hands.
Thank you, Gary.
Sorry, Muriel, did you have a process question or a comment?
It's not a process question. It's just a comment about the discussion in the site walk. We all did intend to go up there, and we all did discuss while we were out on the site walk that we could. We felt like we were satisfied from the walk on the property, and we actually, discussed that with the neighboring abutters and made sure that they felt that that was adequate when we were doing the site walk. We did offer to still go up there, but none of us felt like we needed to see it from the opposite side. We could really ascertain the situation from the property itself.
Okay. So what I'm going to do, just in the interest of time, I know there's a number of people that have raised their hands, so we're going to go through Mr. Gasser, Jane, Mr. Costa, Ed, and Mr. Robertson, and then we'll go ahead and talk about when we continue this hearing too. Does that seem fair to everyone? I know we're up on time and it's late, but for the people that want to comment on this, I want to make sure they have a chance to do so.
Through the chair, Mr. Chairman, you just mentioned 5 people. Could I suggest a 2-minute strict limit each? With 1 minute for maybe response time, 30 seconds each?
Sure. And actually, sure. I think that's reasonable. So actually, we'll start with Nick. Nick, you are on the clock.
Sure. So just the quick response to the abutters up in Fawn Ridge who are looking for the line of sight views. If they could coordinate with Pedro and give some exact locations, because there's many lines of sight that can be evaluated. We want to make sure we survey, say specifically this corridor from their house, or is there a corridor that's more over to the east or to the west that they would like evaluated with the view, because there are multiple views. So I'd like the abutters to coordinate with Pedro and identify which corridor they would like the plan drawn for that takes us from their dwelling to the edge of disturbance, just so everybody's on the same page.
Okay. Thanks, Nick. Next up is Mr. Gasser. And go ahead, Maury. Oh, sorry, you're not quite unmuted yet. Oh, there you go,
Okay.
Maury.
I'll be very quick. I consider the detailed discussion about what types of plantings are appropriate and useful going to take some time to work that out. I think that's still in flux, and I think we should have many more discussions on that. Indeed, with Seaboard, and anyone can participate. I think we need a landscaper or an arborist or somebody to give us advice as well, some professional advice as to what's the right thing for that. I do have a quick question. The open space plan shows that all the plantings are not in the open space, but you mentioned, Pedro mentioned that whoever, well, say HALT, if HALT has the open space, HALT would be responsible for maintaining those plantings, but there wouldn't be on our property. So how are you resolving that?
Nick, do you want to, Nick or someone from Pedro? Go ahead.
That's not an HMR. We can look into the once we have an actual approved disturbed area, then everything else is going to be allocated into the open space. we will look into include those portions of the area into the open space as well. And if we cannot do that, then the maintenance will fall into our responsibility.
Okay, and one final, very quick questions. There's a uploaded today or recently to the planning board website is a max build out sketch. What is that all about? Because that's a very scary looking plan.
No, I just wanted to show what was our very original intended and what we can actually build in the project in this property according to the laws right now. So the intent of that sketch was just to show what we can do, what we have chosen to reduce the system in order to preserve all the trails.
Okay, okay, that makes me feel better. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Jane, go ahead.
Okay, quickly, just to back up what Maury said, I believe we could use some professional help with the screening. The little bit of research that I've done as far as deer resistant plantings, one, and for this area as well, because it's already wooded and we want to screen properly with evergreens that are year-round screenings. One would be a specific type of rhododendron that grows larger, so that would actually screen the solar mounting screens. And the other one, because rhododendrons, unlike arborvitae that people have been talking about, the deer come in and they eat them up during the winter. Unlike, it's different with rhododendrons because their root system goes so deep. They might eat the leaves in the beginning in the first few years that they're planted, but they keep coming back year after year after year. And they're very resilient and they continue to be very hardy. So they are longer lasting. The second species that I would ask the Pedro to consider is something like a blue spruce, because I know you've got a lot of hemlocks and firs up there, but the deer do not like the blue spruce because they're sharp needles and they won't eat them as readily as some of the firs or some of the other softer needles. So I'm just asking you to consider some of those different types of species that
Thanks,
are deer
Jane.
resistant.
Yes, no problem.
Thank you.
Mr. Costa, if we can unmute Mr. Costa. All right, you're on.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'll be brief, and I think that my comment might have already been touched upon by Nick as well. So getting back to this issue of perspectives from the properties along Fawn Ridge Road, I just want to be certain. I get the sense that that request is coming from the Obers in particular, not even necessarily from certain board members, at least one of whom has indicated that you were generally satisfied during the site walk with what you were able to visually depict from the site itself. So we're happy to do this if it's a concern that the board has, but we do need to know from which residences we're going to show perspectives. And we need to get permission from those individual property owners to gain access to each of their properties. So the Obers have said that they want it. Pedro responded and said that he'd be willing to, as did Nick. And so I think that they even went so far as to give permission during this meeting to gain access to their property. But when I then discussion continue, somebody made reference to properties, plural. If we're going to be accessing other abutters here, for example, the adjacent property, I think it's 15 Fawn Ridge Road, we would need permission from that property owner as well. Same thing with the property that's one further property up, I think it's 13 Fawn Ridge Road. We need permission from each of these property owners if what we're being asked to do provide perspectives for the next meeting.
So let's do this. Number one, I believe Mr. Robertson is actually our last public speaker. So if he wants to address that now, he can. But for other abutters that might have interest in this, is it fair to have them reach out to Mr. Rodriguez through the email that's been provided, and they can make that request?
Yes, please. That sounds good.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Anything else, Mr. Costa?
That's all. Thank you.
Okay. And then our last public comment, Mr. Robertson. John, are you unmuting him?
For some reason, it's not letting me unmute him.
I have to unmute him.
Oh, there you go. Mr. Robertson, you're on.
I'm on. Well, great. I'm glad to have the last word. I never get that at home. I just want to say that I agree with Maury and Jane that, as far as evaluating screening, should it come to that we really do need an arborist. We do need someone that can cost this out and can make sure that the applicant is ready and willing to go along with what the arborist and experts say, and that we have the appropriate legal and financial instruments in place to ensure that they comply. As to the giving access to the site and the specific question, my site, which I'm happy to give access to be able to get some guidance as to what those viewpoints are going to look like and what they're thinking. Please reach out to me, or I'll reach out to you with your email, and we can make arrangements for that. But I do think it needs to be done, and I agree with Mr. Ober in saying that we did expect that we would get something like this as a butters, but I'll also reach out and agree with Muriel that yes, when we were on the sidewalk, she did say, do you need us to go to your property and take a look from there? But the answer was no, because the understanding was that yes, this is going to be a sight line, that it's not going to be pleasant, and they didn't need to go to see that it was going to be a problem. So I apologize for that misunderstanding. And the last point that I have is sort of a general comment, is that a lot of these studies and the correspondence and the slides that are shown during these presentations, we as abutters have no idea what we're entering into. We have no idea. We have no ability to prepare, to analyze, to think about it. And I think that's a problem with process, and that if we are engaged in abutters, that we should have these things pushed out to us the same way that they're pushed out to the planning board. And you can say that they're posted on your website, but the website isn't fully up to date, and it's frankly very difficult to try to cull through it to find out what's relevant to our issues. So I'd hope that the board would take that into consideration and figure out a way of putting together mailing lists or whatever to be able to keep everybody that's involved with a particular problem like this or concern apprised of what's going on. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Mr. Robertson. All right. So
Robinson.
I'm sorry, what's that?
I was just Robinson, isn't it?
No, it's Robertson.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I misheard.
Thank you. So we've got to go ahead and continue this hearing. John, any recommendations on when's our next meeting and how does the agenda look? Maybe I should ask Stephanie.
I think it's June 1st, the next one.
Yeah, the next meeting is June 1st.
And we've got our zoning articles, Maspinock Woods, 47, 49. So it seems reasonable that we can continue on that date. Is that?
I think that makes the most sense, to be honest, Carrie.
Okay.
Because Maspinock might cancel again.
Well,
I'm
that'll
not
be a lot of solar that night, because we've also.
So
got
I was
the
just going to
voting
say, so
articles for
people
town
need to
meeting.
be prepared for kind of, a lot of attendance too, and a lot of interest, because it will be the continuation of the public
Yeah.
hearing on the zoning article.
To Madam Chair and Mr. Chair tonight, I will not be attending the June 1st meeting until maybe perhaps late. So however that affects the voting that's required mathematically, it may not, but just to let you know that when considering the next time we have this hearing.
Okay, thanks, Frank. So Pedro, is that amenable to continue to June 1st?
Yeah, we can hold the day for now.
Okay, and
Can-
then, oh, go ahead, Muriel.
I'm sorry. Can I ask people, abutters and planning board members alike, to really think about what kind of screening can work given our new guidelines and our lessons learned with the solar farm off of Alexander. We really need to give some serious thought to what will screen this appropriately and reasonably, and how we're gonna mandate that in our decision and follow through on that.
Great point, Mariel. Thank you. So, John, do we need to push the decision date as well?
Maybe for the stormwater. Yes, decision needs to get pushed for the stormwater, but not for the special permit.
Okay, so that would be to June 8th.
I would request June 15th.
June 15th. Okay, so I will entertain a motion to continue this public hearing to June 1st and to extend the decision date for the, sorry, you said stormwater?
Water.
To June 15th.
So moved, Muriel Kramer.
Amy Ritterbush, second.
Okay, any further discussion? Then we'll move to the roll call vote. So
Actually,
Gary Trent. Oh,
Could I just
yes,
one
Amy.
discussion point? I just wanted to mention for the abutters and everyone that the planning board, they may have already seen this, but the planning board does have a Google folder for every project on the website. And John Gelsich drops new files in all the time. And so what I do myself is when we have a project coming up, I go to that Google folder for 71 Franklin Road and I sort it by date, and then I can easily see what's new from the last time. And I don't know if they already knew that or not, but it's helpful to me anyway.
Thanks, Amy. Okay, roll call vote. Gary Trendle, yes. Muriel Kramer,
Muriel Kramer, yes.
Dave Paul,
Dave Paul, yes.
Jane Moran,
Jane Moran, yes.
Deb Feinbrug,
Feinberg, yes.
Amy Ritterbush,
Amy Ritterbush, yes.
Frank Durso,
Frank Durso, yes.
and is Mary still on? Did she?
Oh, she was here.
Yes.
just a minute ago.
Mary
Oh, I'm
Larson
sorry.
Marlowe, yes.
Thank you, Mary. I'm sorry. Disappeared off my screen for a moment there. Okay, so we're continued there. And lastly, I'm sorry.
That's right. I was just kidding. I thought we were ready for motion to adjourn.
Yes, so I will request a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, discussion, I'm assuming no. So we'll do the roll call vote. Gary Trendle, yes. Muriel Kramer,
Muriel Kramer, yes.
Dave Paul,
Dave Paul, yes.
Mary Larson Marlowe,
Mary Larson Marlowe, yes.
Jane Moran,
Jane Moran, yes.
Deb Feinbrug,
Feinberg, yes.
Amy Ritterbush,
Amy Ritterbush, yes.
and Frank Durso.
Frank Durso says yes.
Did I miss anybody?
It seems short.
I know it did.
We're missing Rob.
I know. Okay. Well, thanks everyone. Thanks for your patience. Realize these are challenging ones to get through, but we'll be back at it on June 1st. So have a good night, everyone.
See you in a few weeks.
Thank you, Gary. Good meeting.
Good job. Yep.
Have a good night.
You too.